In the wake of Jack the Ripper's reign of terror in Gotham, many of its citizens were justifiably shaken. The serial murderer's impact could not be minimized. One such affected citizen was Harvey Dent. The county prosecutor had been in the thick of the politics during that time. Harvey had prosecuted against his own best friend, Bruce Wayne, thus betraying the millionaire's trust. Harvey had ousted himself as a resentful, two-faced friend. Instead of feeling remorse for this, Harvey's resentment turned to a festering hatred. Despite his Calvinistic upbringings, Harvey saw no problem with this. He had been raised on Christian concepts of predestination and divine justice, and saw this as his true path. He carried on living his life as normal, but he continued to treat Bruce coldly, and Bruce in turn responded in kind. In spite of this, both Harvey and Bruce were involved in the new plans for the Gotham World Fair. The fairgrounds may have been heavily damaged in the fire caused by Jack the Ripper, but the dream for the fair lived on. Spearheaded by Mayor Tolliver, preparations went underway. It was the hope of many that this event would bring the people of Gotham closer together. Gilda Dent, Harvey's wife, watched him unravel over the course of the next few months. Harvey's involvement with the city council proved to be a negative one. A recent arrival to Gotham City, E.N. Ashton, hailed from England. Ashton was a wealthy man, and he became involved with the planning of the new fair. Ashton befriended Harvey during this time, and the two became fast friends. They would go out together to pubs and share their woes over drinks. During many of these outings, Ashton listened to Harvey complain about Bruce Wayne, the trial, and Dent's skewed perception of his former friend. Ashton encouraged Harvey, on numerous occasions, to stand up for himself and confront the young Wayne. Harvey planned to do just that, under the guise of asking Bruce to the Dionysus Club to catch up over drinks. Bruce hesitantly accepted this proposal, wary of his former friend's intentions, and rightly so. The scene that Bruce witnessed upon his arrival to the club was a disparaging one. Harvey was already clearly drunk and antagonistic towards the other patrons. Bruce calmly approached Harvey, attempting to calm him down, but this resulted in Harvey taking a swing at Bruce. In doing so, Dent splashed his drink on the left side of his face, dousing himself in alcohol. Harvey continued trying to strike Bruce, with Bruce lightly fending off his drunken attacks. Harvey eventually lunged at his former friend, but missed entirely, tripping into the fireplace within the club. The alcohol on the left side of his face ignited almost instantaneously, burning him. Bruce grabbed a smoking jacket from a nearby chair and attempted to smother the fire on Harvey, but the damage had already been done. Harvey was rushed to the hospital. He had fourth-degree burns on the left side of his face, exposing his teeth even when his mouth was closed. His lower eyelid was completely gone, which would cause his vision in that eye to blur constantly. The damage to his face was extensive. His hair on that side was singed, and his left ear was melted beyond recognition. Harvey was unable to feel the pain from his injuries due to the extensive nerve damage, but the doctors instructed him that he would need to sterilize his face once every 48 hours in order to prevent infection from setting in. They also instructed him to wear gloves in case he should accidentally touch his face, though it would serve as more of a reminder not to. Harvey was struck a massive blow by this incident. His ego was tied in large part to his good looks. He became withdrawn and irritable. When his wife Gilda came to visit him, he hardly even seemed to notice her. Harvey's self-isolation continued even after he left the hospital. He would go days without eating, and he withdrew from his responsibilities as county prosecutor. Gilda felt helpless to assist Harvey as he had ceased to confide in her months ago. She could swear she sometimes heard two voices coming from his room, his own, and one much deeper and more guttural. Harvey's behavior became increasingly erratic, especially when Bruce attempted to visit him. Internally, Harvey was beginning to lose himself. Horrifically enthralled with the damage to his face, Harvey became obsessed with duality. He remembered learning the philosophies of dualism and determinism in school, and began to make them his model for life. He began to make decisions by flipping his coin, a possession he'd had since childhood. He and Bruce had played all sorts of games as children involving the flipping of his coin. It had been burned badly on one side in the fire, further playing into Harvey's obsession with duality. Harvey did not share these things with anyone, which is why almost no one could have predicted what happened next. The Gotham police received a tip on a murder that had transpired. Upon arriving at the scene, they discovered a cryptic and grisly spectacle. 2 bodies were present, and they seemed to be identical. The police discovered that they were twins, and the address they had lived at was 22 Tucson Street. Their names were Thomas and Marcus Dugan, members of Gotham's socialite circle. The building they had been found in was formerly known as Janus Casino. It had been shuttered years prior by the owners, the Sionis family. Inspector Gordon, who was overseeing the case, thought it was just strange enough to bring the Batman in on it. The number 2 coming into play so much seemed off to the inspector. Gotham had just seen the defeat of one serial murderer, and Gordon wasn't about to take any chances. Bruce hadn't suited up since the Ripper's defeat, but he could see that the need for the Bat was evident. The Batman joined the investigation, but without more evidence they were unable to discover much. Then another event occurred, a robbery at Gotham Bank. By the time the police arrived, the culprit had already fled, but witnesses gave a gory account of the perpetrator. They alleged that the bank robber had wielded twin pistols and stolen a total of $2,222.22 from the bank. The robber had also been horribly disfigured on the left side of his face. Witnesses claim it was like he had 2 faces. The police took this into account, and the name Double Man was coined due to the crime's focus on the number 2. The Batman, on the other hand, was very concerned to hear the witnesses' accounts. The Bat rushed to the home of Harvey Dent. His suspicions were confirmed when he found a very worried Gilda Dent. She told him that Harvey had gone missing. She had not seen him in a week, which was right in the time frame of these murders. In Harvey's study, the Bat discovered notes and scrawlings detailing the 2 crimes that had been committed thus far. The Batman's worst suspicions were realized. Harvey Dent was the Double Man. Now in a spiral, Harvey continued on his dualistic crime spree. Reason had nothing to do with it, and the crimes seemed random. The Batman saw the anger and pain in his former friend's actions, but he could not locate him. Predicting such random and specific crimes proved difficult, with the police and the Bat usually arriving too late. What finally led the Batman to Harvey was a letter. It didn't arrive at the police station, and it didn't arrive at any of the crime scenes. It came to Wayne Manor, and it was addressed to Bruce Wayne. Bruce was startled by this sudden development, and became very worried upon reading it. The letter detailed Harvey's unraveling over the past weeks. He'd begun to feel a separation between the part of his mind that upheld the ideals of law and justice, and the part of his mind that consisted of his darker impulses: anger, hatred, greed. He stated that he could not account for long periods of time, gaps in his memory. He'd also begun to converse with himself, experiencing it as if the disfigured half of his face was another person altogether. He stated in the letter, "I feel as if my face has been split in 2. Harvey Dent is no longer Harvey Dent. He is Two-Face." Bruce grew increasingly concerned as he progressed through the letter. He got the sense that Harvey had written this letter while in a more lucid state of mind, and he felt the need to answer Harvey's call for help. Harvey had detailed his whereabouts, the defunct courthouse north of Skinner's End. Bruce suited up and went to the old courthouse, but not before dispatching Dickie, Jason, and Tim to alert the police of the Double Man's location. The scene that the Batman came upon was shocking to him. The courthouse had been divided in 2, with one side being stately and clean, and the other being marred, burned, and dirty. Upon exploring the premises, the Batman was attacked by Harvey. The former county prosecutor was firing his dual revolvers, all the while shouting in a deep, guttural voice, asking how the Bat had found him. In almost the same instant, he withdrew his attack and answered his own question in his normal voice. The Bat was wary of doing Harvey any harm, and cautiously moved towards his old friend. This caused fury to ignite in Harvey's eyes, and he attacked again. After a skirmish, the Batman managed to disarm and restrain Harvey. Harvey was distraught, and the Batman watched his friend fall apart. Harvey went back and forth with himself, crying, shouting, and berating himself for his failure. The Batman was torn apart to see Harvey like this. He could tell that his friend needed help. He turned Harvey over to the police with careful instruction to get him help from a psychologist. Professor Hugo Strange jumped on the opportunity, but was countermanded by Bruce Wayne, who was a major donor to Arkham Asylum. Harvey's care went to a recent hire at Arkham, Dr. Harleen Frances Quenzel, a classmate of Dr. Jonathan Crane's. The tragedy that befell Harvey Dent would prove to be a controversial one. On the one hand, Harvey had served dutifully as the county prosecutor in Gotham. On the other hand, he had been a womanizer, betrayed his close friend, and committed numerous crimes. His rehabilitation would seemingly prove to help him, but it would really serve to make him more inclined towards his darker impulses. Dr. Quenzel's attempt to eliminate Harvey's duality would inadvertently suppress the good side of him. The case of the Double Man was one that haunted Bruce for years. His confrontation with Harvey in the Dionysus Club had been the start of his spiral. Harvey may have been receiving what many perceived as help, but Gotham had not seen the last of him. The Double Man, Two-Face, would strike again. The alliance between the Batman and the Gotham police was an uneasy one at first. Mayor Tolliver had little patience for supposed masked heroes in his city. In spite of this, Inspector James Gordon continued his unofficial working relationship with the Bat. This alliance was one that Gordon told his wife about. Gordon's daughter, Barbara, was fascinated with the vigilante. She determined through careful questioning and deduction that her father had a partnership with the Bat. She was an avid reader of Sherlock Holmes mystery novels. The twists and turns contained within their pages captured her attention and her imagination. She envisioned herself within the stories, finding clues and helping to solve the mysteries. Barbara would share the intricacies of these stories with her brother James Jr. This fascination with mysteries and stopping criminals led to James Jr. joining the police force alongside his father. Barbara was not allowed to do this. Women on the police force was not something Mayor Tolliver would allow. But Barbara had something else in mind. Taking inspiration from the Batman, and also from a fashion trend in a magazine she liked to read, she crafted an outfit. It utilized the fashion of the time as well as some adjustments to make it more functional. Barbara made a mask that resembled the head of a bat, and a cloak that, when outstretched, would mimic the wings of a bat. The result was something fashionable, functional, and fantastical. She kept this project a secret from her mother and father. She knew they wouldn't approve. Barbara then set out to find the Batman. She knew that her father met with him regularly and, upon doing some sleuthing, discovered that Gordon used a searchlight shined from the roof of the Gotham police station in order to signal the Bat. Upon doing so, her first time meeting the vigilante did not go as expected. Barbara introduced herself as the Batgirl, and she offered to help the Bat maintain order in Gotham. She wanted to be a crime fighter. The Batman shot her down, telling her that it was too dangerous. The horrors he'd seen so far in Gotham kept him from agreeing to it. He wanted to keep anyone he could from experiencing them. Barbara went home dejected. Everything changed with the murder of one woman. Laurel Marlowe, a wealthy member of Gotham's high society, was found murdered with her 4 fingers severed. There was no evidence to point the police or the Batman to a suspect. The crime scene showed no sign of forced entry. Both Inspector Gordon and his son, James Jr., were on the case and told Barbara about it. Not much was resolved, and soon a second murder occurred. This time it was a doctor and his wife. The two were found at the Gotham train station, also with their forefingers severed. The Batman and police were again unable to identify a suspect. Upon hearing of this second set of murders from her brother and father, Barbara reached a sudden realization. Donning her uniform as the Batgirl, she raced to the police station to signal the Batman again. The Bat, angered at being contacted this way, again, was cut short by the Batgirl's explanation. She informed him that these murders mirrored ones committed by the fictional villain, James Moriarty, in the Sherlock Holmes novels she loved. This shed a whole new light on the investigation. The wealthy woman who had been murdered mirrored a number of murders orchestrated in the fictional works of Arthur Conan Doyle. The doctor and his wife, who had been murdered, mirrored Moriarty's attempt on Dr. John Watson's and Mary Watson's lives. The Batman begrudgingly agreed to bring the Batgirl onto the case. While the evidence was lacking, what they did know helped tremendously. This new killer was apparently an avid reader of Sherlock Holmes stories. The Batman and Batgirl determined that the killer also had a knowledge of law enforcement. The lack of evidence at the crime scene showed he knew what to dispose of to avoid detection. The Batman suspected that the killer may even be on the police force. Utilizing this knowledge, they laid a trap. The killer's fixation on Moriarty and suspected arrogance and hubris led the Batman and Batgirl to put a notice in the paper via the police. It was addressed to one J. Moriarty and read, "Reichenbach begins at sundown. Meet me in Cobblepot Park. Yours truly, S. Holmes." This was a ploy to appeal to the killer's theatrical nature by referencing Reichenbach Falls, the fictional final confrontation between Holmes and Moriarty. The Batman and Batgirl staked out the park and waited for their prey. Sure enough, a man arrived and lurked near a park bench, but the nearby street lamps cast shadows on his face. They could not identify him. The two vigilantes approached the man who, upon seeing them, broke into a run. A quickly thrown batarang and rope tangled the fleeing man's legs, causing him to tumble to the ground. Quickly securing him, the Batgirl was shocked to see the face of her brother, James Gordon Jr. Shortly after, the police arrived, taking James Jr. into custody. The young policeman revealed he had secretly resented his father and looked up to the recently deceased Jack the Ripper. He'd seen the Ripper's presence in Gotham as a baptism by blood that James Jr. had wanted to continue. Inspector Gordon, greatly saddened by his son's betrayal, sent him off to be locked up until he could stand trial. The Batgirl, greatly shaken by the news as well, was approached by the Batman. He apologized for his previous harshness and extended a hand, offering to train the Batgirl. She agreed and became the first member of the team that would one day become known as the Gotham Knights. In the meantime, Barbara Gordon, and subsequently the Batgirl, while shaken, would continue her training and become a defender of the city she loved. The Batgirl would make her mark on Gotham City.
Waylon Jones's time in Arkham Asylum had not been kind to him. Whether it was the abuses at the hands of the orderlies or the sessions orchestrated by Professor Hugo Strange, being in Arkham was like hell on earth for the killer CROC. During his incarceration, his physical condition worsened as well. His ichthyosis vulgaris had caused the remainder of his hair to fall out, and the atavistic regression initiated on him by Strange had affected his mind as well. Atavistic regression is a form of hypnosis that reverts the brain to its base functions. Waylon had become even more animalistic in his mannerisms and tendencies. The orderlies had taken to only giving him raw meat, and his cell was kept cold and damp. His treatment and these conditions reminded CROC of his former torment at the sideshow. His rage grew with each passing day, and revenge was always in the back of his mind. During the riot of 1892, when Jack the Ripper caused a mass breakout at the asylum, Killer Croc was the reason that Hugo Strange lost an eye. His vengeance on the warden of Arkham was exacted. He then escaped the confines of the facility, along with numerous others, venturing into Gotham City. Croc disappeared back into the Gotham sewers, planning to stay away from the public eye until he was all but forgotten. He lived off of the rats that made their dwelling in the sewer. Croc remembered the way the people of Gotham had treated him. He remembered his treatment at the hands of Taylor Haley at the sideshow. Croc would never forget, and he would never forgive. His mind was set on revenge, and his more animalistic appearance and mentality had set him on this path. Gotham was in high spirits. The Gotham World Fair was set to start in May of 1893. With the beginning of this celebration came one of the largest undertakings the city officials had ever seen. Vendors came from all over. Stage performers and novelty acts came from far and wide. One such act was Haley's Circus and Sideshow. These vendors, among others, would come into town to view the fairgrounds months before the fair would even begin. The Gotham Gazette took this opportunity to write a piece on the visitors. It was a good way to promote the fair even more. Some of these discarded issues of the Gazette inevitably found their way into the sewers. Wayland found one such newspaper, and upon reading it, saw that Taylor Haley would be coming to Gotham for the fair. The Killer Croc found himself filled again with visceral rage at the man who had originally cost him his humanity. In Wayland's mind, Taylor Haley had been responsible for his humiliation, as well as the death of his friend Mary Dahl. The paper stated that Taylor Haley would be staying at the newly opened Labyrinthine Hotel, owned by one Ian Ashton. Wayland saw an opportunity to exact revenge. Professor Hugo Strange had done so many sessions of atavistic regression with Wayland that the Killer Croc now had a one-track mind. Jones had his eyes set on Haley, and would not stop until he had achieved his goal. On April 2nd of 1893, Wayland waited until the cover of night to make his move. While wearing a hat and pea coat he had found in the sewers, Jones entered the hotel lobby and asked which room Haley was in. The lobby clerk, tired and disinterested, pointed him to room 207. Jones made his way up a flight of stairs to room 207 and burst his way in. He was not greeted by the sight of Taylor Haley, but instead a man whom he did not recognize. The hotel clerk had unintentionally sent him to the wrong room. The man tried to reason with Wayland, but Wayland's mind was already set on a downhill tread. The unfortunate man saw the Killer Croc, in all his terrifying countenance, rushing at him with his teeth and claws bared. A stagecoach passing on the street below was bearing passengers. They were suddenly startled by a scream as the roof of the stagecoach caved in. The corpse of the man from room 207 had been thrown from the building and landed on them. The police were called, and Ian Ashton himself arrived to greet them too. Ashton told the police that his employee, the hotel clerk, had seen a large man in tattered clothing ask for Taylor Haley's room. Ashton told them that the clerk had fortunately given the man the wrong number, accidentally. The police interviewed Taylor Haley as well, who had no idea that someone had even come looking for him. When they described the witness to Haley, his face went white with terror. Haley knew exactly who had been looking for him. He told the police to look for Wayland Jones, the Killer Croc. The police put out a warrant for Croc's arrest, and a citywide search began. Jones had been missing since the breakout at Arkham, and was high on the police's list of priorities. Inspector Gordon, in cooperation with the Batman, contacted the vigilante and caught him up to speed on the case. The Batman had heard of Wayland Jones. The police had arrested him 2 years before the reign of the Ripper. Gordon told the Batman that they suspected Taylor Haley to be the Killer Croc's main target. Gordon had placed Haley under police surveillance as an assurance to the worried circus owner. The Batman saw that the best course of action was to prepare and wait. the killer croc would most likely return of his own accord. The Batman joined in the stakeout at the Labyrinthine Hotel, unbeknownst to the police officers assigned there. 2 days after the stakeout began, the Batman saw Taylor Haley exit the hotel. Curious as to where Haley was going, the Batman tailed him through the streets of Gotham. Soon enough, Haley entered a pawn shop, and the Batman remained outside lurking in the shadows. It didn't take long for the masked vigilante to see a large figure wearing tattered clothing. The Batman did not waste any time. He leaped into action to confront the figure. As the Bat approached him, the man must have heard him. The figure's coat fluttered as he turned and swiped his claws at the Batman. There was no doubt. It was the killer Croc. The Bat had heard of his terrifying appearance, but actually seeing Wayland took him aback. This hesitancy allowed the Croc to attack. Jones was already in a rage. His anger overwhelmed all of his thoughts. He had seen Haley enter the pawn shop. This rage lent Croc strength, and he knocked the Batman onto the ground. Inside the pawn shop, Haley could see the commotion occurring outside. In a panic, he rushed out the front door of the shop. He wanted to run past Croc and the Batman, but Wayland moved much more quickly than Haley could imagine. The Croc turned and swung his fists, knocking Haley to the ground as well. The Croc pounced on Haley and frantically bit and clawed at the man. He might have killed the circus owner then and there if the Batman hadn't acted quickly. He used the rope on his belt to tangle up the Croc and pull him back. Wayland struggled against it, but the Batman knocked him out cold with a punch. The killer Croc came crashing to the ground. The Batman secured Croc with more rope and handcuffs, and then went to check on Haley. The circus owner was in bad shape. His leg was broken, and he was losing blood. The Batman did his best to treat Haley's wounds, then left once the police arrived. Haley would later die in the hospital, despite the doctor's best efforts. The killer Croc had gotten his revenge. Waylon Jones was adamant that he did not want to go back to Arkham. He was not listened to except by two people. One of them was Bruce Wayne. The millionaire had taken a vested interest in Waylon. He was aware that Haley had been a cruel man. Dick Grayson had shared with him the story of his parents leaving the circus. Bruce suspected that Waylon had been another victim of that cruelty. Waylon, while not in a normal state of mind, had kept repeating that Haley had killed his friend, Mary Dahl. The other person who took an interest in Waylon was E.N. Ashton. Ashton saw in Waylon someone whom the world had discarded, a standpoint that Ashton himself was familiar with. Both the combined efforts of Bruce Wayne and E.N. Ashton allowed Waylon to be transferred from Arkham Asylum to another facility, Belle Reve Penitentiary. Waylon would remain here for rehabilitation for years. Waylon found the accommodations at Belle Reve much more agreeable than they had been at Arkham Asylum. Most of the other inmates at this prison left him alone due to his appearance. CROC found that this had advantages. The other inmates had a respect for him, even if it was out of fear. It did not take long for CROC to become the impromptu king among the other inmates. At long last, King CROC felt that he had found his place in the world.
After the arrest of Margaret Sorrow and the disbanding of the Thieving Magpies in 1882, many of the women Margaret once employed would find themselves in the discomfort of asylums or prison cells. Despite their skills at pickpocketing, shoplifting, and con artistry, with Margaret gone, they had no organization left for guidance and no consistent protection. This made them more vulnerable to the authorities, and many were arrested. Many of those who didn't wind up incarcerated found work as burlesque dancers at the Monarch Theater. While it seemed a glamorous life of stage and show business, offstage and behind the curtain, the Monarch had fallen into an ill state over the years. Once upon a time, people from across Gotham had come to enjoy fine arts in these halls. In 1891, the theater had seen the menace of Clayface, whose many murders drove away a number of the upper-class patrons, and brought in thrill-seekers hoping to catch the monster in action. The burlesque dancers were treated crudely by the new patrons, and with disdain by the other performers who regarded them as common criminals, and women of the night. Often, if a dancer were assaulted, it went unreported to the police because the managers found it easier to pay the girls to keep quiet than to upset their often drunk and disorderly patrons. If the girls spoke up for themselves, or someone spoke up for them, that person would usually find themselves unemployed. When Selina Kyle returned to Gotham in 1889, she met many of the remaining magpies who had not been arrested working as burlesque dancers at the Monarch Theater, often being hassled by unruly male patrons and co-workers. Some of these same women attended suffrage meetings with Selina, and, in time, many of them grew to see her like a sister and a mother among them. This rang especially true when she broke Oliver Wesker's hands for groping two of the younger burlesque performers. Selina often told the girls someday, "The bulls and bears of Gotham will someday hide away when they hear the call of the Gotham City Sirens." The name was in reference to the sirens of legend and their enticing songs that would lure sailors to their doom. Selina told the former magpies that many would underestimate the women, at their own peril. This is why they would become the sirens. Because of this, the men of Gotham who had pushed their voices down wouldn't expect it when the voices of women were finally heard, and change came to Gotham. When Sister Leslie Tompkins was killed by Jack the Ripper in 1892, she left the orphanage at St. Caldwell's to the care of Selina, who promptly established the orphanage as the Gotham Women's Suffrage headquarters, as well as the primary address for her charity to improve the lives of Gotham's youth. Selina hired the former magpies as her staff to help run things and care for the children. She trained any of the girls who wished to read and write. Selina made sure the education Sister Leslie once offered the youth of Gotham was still available. In addition to the usual subjects, Selina and the girls taught etiquette, sewing, and other skills to the children. Before long, as the Catwoman, Selina taught the girls the arts of self-defense and deduction. These, combined with their once sharp thieving skills, made the former magpies into formidable young women. In spite of this, they were still few in number. Some in Gotham, like Mayor Tolliver, often found ways to publicly resist the group's actions. Occasionally, suffragettes would be arrested for protest, or a scathing media editorial would come out condemning the group as former criminals. Two notable suffragettes that studied under Selina and the Sirens were Vesper Fairchild and Victoria Vale. They went on to become two of Gotham's first female journalists, and Victoria Vale was among the first women to receive a Pulitzer in the mid-1920s. Victoria and Vesper helped fight back against the hatred towards the group in the newspapers by spreading the messages and goals of equality the group advocated for. 11 months passed between the death of Jack the Ripper and the return of the Batman to take on the Double Man in December 1892. During that time, Selina tracked down many of the magpies who had been incarcerated, and using some of the inheritance Sister Leslie left behind, paid for their bail and freedom, asking in return only that they come into her employ, eventually amassing a group of 39 women answering to her. What had once been 40 thieves were now 40 of what Selina called the Gotham City Sirens. Women walked the streets of Gotham a little safer, knowing that one of their neighbors could be one of the most well-trained fighters in Gotham. Men even began taking care in brothels, not to become too out of hand lest the sirens come for them. Perhaps the most prominent case worked by the Gotham City Sirens were the Magpie murders. Members of the former Magpie gang were being found murdered, often with a shiny object of some sort shoved down their throat. It was unclear who this new serial murderer might be, and Selina considered reaching out to the Batman until Margaret Sorrow was killed. She had been the former leader of the Magpies. Among the things found in Margaret's throat was a ring bearing the engraving, M. Pie. One of the sirens told Selina that this stood for Marion Pie, former right hand to Margaret Sorrow. The women she had been killing were former magpies, and now all the sirens had targets on their backs. Selina and the sirens laid a trap claiming to be hosting a party for the Gotham Women's Suffrage Organization at their headquarters, open to the public so people could come and see the work being done there. Marion got wind of this and decided that she would attack and kill as many of the women as she could by whatever means necessary. They had betrayed Margaret, and she wouldn't stand for it. Marion, it turned out, hadn't fared as well as some of the other magpies. Marion had been arrested and hospitalized shortly after Margaret, and no one had come to save her, in her perception. In reality, Selina did her best to help and save as many of the former magpies as she could, but some of them fell through the cracks. She could not realistically find and protect all of them, try as she might. Marion served her sentence and was released while the other magpies had been, in her eyes, saved by Selina. Her time in the hospital being subjected to poor conditions caused her anger and ferocity to consume her every thought. Marion concealed knives in an elaborate outfit adorned with black and white feathers and made her way to the event. Eyewitnesses say she seemed to glow under the candlelight and could charm anyone who crossed her path. Marion snuck into the kitchen and killed the chef, starting a fire in an effort to cause mass panic and allow for more victims. What Marion did not expect was for the Catwoman to arrive and engage her in combat. Marion was enraged that her revenge on Selina Kyle had been interrupted. The Catwoman asked why Marion wanted to kill Selina so badly. Marion told her that she had seen the former magpies receive aid from Selina, while she herself was left to suffer. This struck Selina to her core. She hadn't realized that her efforts had not reached all of the former magpies. It made her question whether she had actually done everything in her power. As the sirens rushed to put out the flames, the Catwoman and Marion battled with great fierceness until Selina was forced to knock Marion unconscious, because no amount of reasoning seemed to reach her. The sirens escorted Marion to the GCPD, and Selina dressed the many cuts she had suffered from Marion's knives. All this newfound attention landing in her lap made Selina a prime candidate for the Gotham World's Fair Planning Committee. This brought Selina back into the life of Bruce Wayne. Mayor Tolliver hated this, and he made sure Selina knew it. She was often separated from the main event planning and left to meals or speeches rather than what Mayor Tolliver called important men's work. Despite this, one newcomer was thrilled to hear all her ideas. His name was Ian Ashton. He told Selina that in Europe, he had seen women on the royal throne. He told Selina that she would make an excellent queen of Gotham. Selina was immediately wary of Ashton. She had heard flattery like this before from other men. In spite of this, she brushed off his flattery and was at least cordial to him. When the horrible events that led to Harvey Dent's incarceration as the Double Man took place, Selina briefly confided in Ashton, though she had no idea he had been the one to goad the fight between the two men. Selina loved Bruce Wayne. Ashton could see it, but he didn't care because as time went on, he too fell for Selina. Selina thought little of it as she constantly had people vying for her attention, but, in Ashton's mind, Selina only had eyes for a man who seemingly did not pay her heed. Though she may have thought little of it, this friendship with Ashton would put the Catwoman in a great, terrible, and puzzling peril. Born to Jewish parents in America in 1863, Harleen Frances Quinzel was an only child. The Quinzel family was from Hartford, Connecticut, but in 1870 moved to Gotham City, New Jersey. Harleen's father, Arthur, had found work there as a factory worker for Sionis Industries. Harleen's life growing up was a mostly average one. Her family had no great wealth to speak of. Both her father and mother were cruel to her in different ways. Her mother, Sheila, had very high expectations for her daughter. She drove Harleen to excel in homemaking and even in academics. It was important to Sheila that her daughter received an education, even if most assumed it would be unnecessary for a woman. She often went to extreme measures, punishing Harleen for the most minor infractions regarding her studies. Harleen's father, while never physically abusive, would fly into drunken rages at times. His work at the factory frustrated him daily, and he tended to take it out on his family. In spite of this difficult upbringing, Harleen did exceedingly well in her studies, focusing on philosophy and the classics. By the time she came of age to leave the home of her parents, she had her mind set on obtaining a degree from Gotham University. It was difficult to obtain her degree in philosophy due to the sexism she faced from numerous fronts, her father telling her she'd never amount to anything, her male professors and peers jeering at her. She fought through it, and, upon graduation, even received an offer to teach philosophy and the classics at Gotham University. She accepted, and after 3 successful years of this, was offered the opportunity to teach a course in the budding field of psychology. The only catch was that she first had to study it for at least a year. The reason that she was approached was because the field of psychology was so new at the time. Most considered it to be a combination of many things. Philosophy's questions about existence, reason, and the mind was one factor. The knowledge of the authors and characters within their classic works was another factor. This made Harleen, in the Gotham University Board's professional opinion, the most qualified. Because she did not have the budget to travel abroad, she was assigned as a psychiatric assistant at Arkham Asylum for the criminally insane. It was a good opportunity for her to gain experience, to study the methods of other doctors and practice them herself. There she worked with Dr. Jonathan Crane, Professor Hugo Strange, and many others working in Gotham's fledgling field of psychology. For the first couple of months, she mainly assisted doctors in their interactions and assessments of the patients interred there. Soon enough, her acute awareness for the profession reached the notice of the warden. Hugo Strange offered to allow her to conduct her own interviews and write her own assessments. Quinzel gratefully accepted this offer. She conducted numerous interviews with a select number of patients and enjoyed it thoroughly. There was still something missing, however. Harleen knew that if she did not have something concrete, an exceptional achievement or breakthrough, she would not be taken seriously upon returning to Gotham University. Not long after this realization, the seeming answer to her predicament landed at her feet. Jerome Henshaw, the merry widower, had murdered countless women of high society using strychnine. This had resulted in a ghastly death, one where the victim's facial muscles were twisted into a ghastly smile. In attempting to evade police, Jerome had taken the very poison he had killed with. Instead of killing him, it damaged the nerves in his face, giving him a permanent rictus grin. This is where Jerome had acquired his macabre name, the Merry Widower. Jerome had been at Arkham Asylum for a few years at this point. Hugo Strange himself had conducted sessions with the very disturbed man. Strange had concluded it a dead end. Jerome was uncooperative and irreverent towards Strange's approaches at treatment. Harleen saw an opportunity in this Merry Widower, her ticket to building a professional career in psychology. It took much convincing, but Hugo Strange begrudgingly allowed her to take Jerome Henshaw on as a patient. Harleen was elated. She would still require armed guards to be with her while conducting sessions. Jerome was a dangerous man. But she saw this as her chance, her big break. Soon after beginning these sessions, Harleen Quinzel was struck by the man before her. Jerome Henshaw, despite his disfigurement, was a very polite and respectful patient towards her. He readily answered questions, cracked a joke every so often, and carried himself very respectably. The purpose of Harleen's sessions with him were twofold: to learn why this man had killed so many, and to possibly help find a treatment or cure for him. It was an exceptional endeavor for her to undertake, but she could have no idea the cost it would exact. She could not know that, in the mind of the Merry Widower, he was the one conducting these sessions. They had countless appointments wherein Quinzel asked Henshaw many questions about his childhood. Henshaw answered with tales of the injustices heaped upon him by his family, ostracism, beatings, bullying, and much more. One could hardly tell fact from fiction in his stories, but Harleen took note of all of it. As the sessions progressed, Jerome continued to share his tales of woe, and Harleen began to feel herself gaining pity for him, an almost kindred sense of the feeling. She felt this at least until he began to speak about the murders. Here, Quinzel truly saw the face of the Merry Widower. He spoke of the women he had killed, whores he called them, who had so willingly given him the riches he'd asked for. He detailed specifics of the murders, the poison, the pain it caused, and the horrible grins left on their faces afterwards. This sudden shift from an amicable patient-doctor relationship to a grisly spectacle shocked Harleen. She went to Professor Strange and requested a brief postponement of her sessions with Jerome Henshaw. Strange granted this to her, having conducted sessions similar to hers himself. Harleen went back to her other patients for a few weeks, but she eventually found herself drawn back to Jerome's case. Her career was important enough to her to begin the sessions again. This time, however, she had no disillusionments about the man before her, his respectable demeanor masking a sadistic killer underneath the surface. Jerome seemed elated to see her again. He asked how she had been, and they resumed their sessions. Unbeknownst to Harleen, Henshaw had been nicking materials from her and the guards with her during their previous sessions. He used these materials, pens and metal scraps, to construct a tool to aid him in picking the lock on his cell. During this latest session, Henshaw suddenly walked forward in his cell, swung the cell door open, and quickly dispatched the 2 guards. Harleen, frozen with fear by the suddenness of these happenings, screamed as Jerome grabbed her and dragged her along with him. Jerome fled Arkham with Harleen in tow, and they disappeared into Gotham's slums. All of the news outlets, from the smallest local rag to the Gotham Gazette, had the story of the breakout of the Merry Widower on the front page. The story itself gave a description of Harleen as well, telling everyone to be on the lookout and report anything to the police. The police patrols, spearheaded by Inspector James Gordon, sought Jerome Henshaw and his victim day and night. Gordon would not rest until he found them. Gordon's special interest in this case was tied to his initial arrest of Jerome a few years prior. Gordon also immediately contacted the Batman and brought him into the investigation. In the meantime, the Merry Widower had brought Harleen to the abandoned and destroyed former fairgrounds. It had been left desolate in the wake of Jack the Ripper's attacks in Gotham. This made it the perfect place in the widower's mind to bring his hostage. Henshaw held Harleen Quinzel in a warehouse here, subjecting her to psychological and physical torture. Entranced by his disfigurement, Henshaw fashioned himself after the character Punch from the beloved puppet show, and called Harleen his Judy. He even fashioned outfits for both of them. Harleen's outfit was fashioned after that of the Harlequin style of comedy, and Henshaw's was fine purples and other garish colors. No one knows for sure exactly what horrors Jerome Henshaw subjected Harleen Quinzel to, but what is known are the headlines that made an appearance weeks later. Gotham Bank was robbed, and the police questioned the employees about the robbers. The description they received was Punch and Judy come to life. A day later, a tailor was robbed. All of the red and black fabric was stolen. Eventually, eyewitnesses went to the newspapers as well. Gotham became aware of a new threat: the Joker and the Harlequin. The papers renamed Henshaw the Joker due to his ghastly grin and his resemblance to the playing card of the same name. As for the Harlequin, almost no one knew for sure. The ones who had a suspicion were the police and the Batman. They suspected that Harleen Quinzel had been turned by the Joker. It was hard to predict where they would strike next. Their pattern of movement had been as unpredictable as the acrobatics of a Harlequin. It wasn't until the Joker and the Harlequin kidnapped Mayor Tolliver that the Batman finally had a chance to confront the pair. The Joker had grabbed Mayor Tolliver while the city figurehead had been walking his dog. Joker and the Harlequin held Tolliver at their headquarters in the abandoned fairground. Joker then sent a letter telling the police what he had done and where to find them. Joker knew that he was giving up their base of operations, but he seemingly didn't care. What he cared about was who would answer the call. Joker had read of the Batman's exploits extensively in the papers: his battle with Jack the Ripper, his apprehension of Clayface, and numerous others. Sure enough, the Batman was first to arrive on the scene. Inspector Gordon had contacted the Bat soon after they received word of Tolliver's location. The Harlequin, referred to as Harley by the Joker in passing, attacked the Batman with a giant wooden mallet upon his arrival. The Bat narrowly avoided the mallet. It would have crushed his skull if he had been a second too late. Realizing the fragility of the situation, there were 2 hostages here, Tolliver and Quinzel. The Batman defended himself, but with none of his usual brutality. While the Bat was occupied with Harley, the Joker leaped from the shadows and plunged a knife into the Batman's shoulder, laughing all the while. The Bat pulled the knife from his shoulder, hurling it at the Joker. He knew he didn't have much time before the blood loss made him combatively ineffective. During the course of his battle with the Joker and Harley, the Batman broke Harley's mallet in half, and knocked out a few of the Joker's teeth as well. All 3 of them were in rough shape: the Batman and Joker physically, and Harleen Quinzel psychologically. Joker, battered and bruised on the ground, laughed as the Batman stood victorious over him. He told the Batman,
"We're destined to play this game forever, you and I."
The crazed killer then grabbed Harley and held a gun to her head. He pushed the former psychologist forward and escaped by leaping out of the window nearby. The Joker was not found by police that evening. In the wake of this battle, Harleen was placed in Arkham, a patient rather than a doctor this time. The doctors at Arkham could not explain why Harleen had gone from being an unwilling hostage to helping perpetrate crimes herself. Analysts decades later would determine that she had suffered from severe Stockholm Syndrome, instigated by the torture she had endured at the Joker's hands. Harleen remained seemingly loyal to the Joker and would remain this way for some time. Only one person would be able to bring her out of it. Until then, Harleen Quinzel, the Harlequin, would remain incarcerated at Arkham Asylum. It had been months since the reign of the Ripper in Gotham City, but some still felt the effects of it. Dr. Pamela Isley was one such person. Jack the Ripper had left her lying in the street covered in slashes and stab wounds. She had been left for dead, saved only by the field medic experience of the Batman. Isley had survived until she was discovered by the authorities. She was rushed to Gotham Hospital, where she was left in the care of Professor Hugo Strange. The Batman had not brought her there because he had been chasing the Ripper. Strange was the chief medical authority in Gotham, and he claimed he wished to take her into his care because they were old friends. Before his journey to Gotham from Germany, Strange had studied under Dr. Isley. He had been observing doctors in other fields to determine trial methods for the budding field of psychology. Strange had then brought those notes to his mentor, Wilhelm Wundt. All of these past events were what Strange constituted as making them old friends. In reality, Isley had been annoyed that she had been saddled with someone who had observed her every move. Now, as she lay in Gotham Hospital, she was entirely unaware that Professor Strange was her physician. Hugo Strange had very unorthodox methods. What he considered treatment would be considered malpractice by others in his field. He used the notes that Isley had compiled over the years. She had done extensive research on plant perception, the theory that plants could sense and respond to speech, that they even understood it. Isley had believed that it aided the growth and development of plants. Strange wanted to use her research to make a name for himself, one even greater than his mentor Wilhelm Wundt. He conducted numerous tests and experiments on Isley while she was kept sedated and restrained. One such experiment was mithridatism, the exposure of a person to certain toxins in order to build immunity to them. Isley had already purposely exposed herself to some of these to build immunity, but Strange continued it on her, even taking it further than Isley had ever intended. His intentions were truly despicable. He took his position of medical authority to the extreme and grossly abused his power. If anyone questioned his methods of care for Isley, he had them fired from the hospital. His reasons for conducting experiments on Isley were twofold: to see if her notes and hypotheses had credibility, and to see if these could be implemented into a human being. These experiments did have an effect on Isley. The stress Strange put her through caused the pigmentation of her skin to change. Her skin became a pale, almost green color, and her eyes took on a reddish hue. It is still speculated what the cause of this was. Some argued that it was an advanced form of pigmentation disorder, and others said it was due to an excess of chlorophyll in her system. No one knows for sure. Whatever the case, the experiments that Strange conducted on Isley had changed her, inside and out. But she would not be here for much longer. Unbeknownst to Hugo Strange, his experiments with mithridatism had caused Isley to gradually become immune to the sedative he had been using on her. Eventually, Isley awoke in Gotham Hospital dazed, confused, and in a state of great stress. The stress from the experiments gave her immense strength, and she broke free from her restraints. Hugo Strange was not currently at Gotham Hospital. She knew that Strange had been conducting experiments on her. She had heard him speaking and seen him in flashes as she had slowly regained consciousness. The fact that he had experimented on her filled her with great rage. Isley waited until Strange unlocked the door to her room and attacked him as he entered. She hit him over the head with a metal bedpan and fled into the hallway of the hospital. Isley escaped and ran into the streets of Gotham. She looked for any police officers she could and eventually found some on patrol. She implored them to help her and told them that she had been experimented on. The police merely laughed at her. Given her pale appearance, they assumed she was either homeless or a drug addict. The police paid her no heed and left. It was then that Isley realized she would get no help from the police. With nowhere else to turn, Isley went to her old friend, Selina Kyle. Selina now led the women's suffrage movement in Gotham, headquartered at the old orphanage, St. Caldwell's. Behind the scenes, the women in Selina's employ were the Gotham City Sirens. They were a growing network, but Selina gladly welcomed Isley into their fold while she recovered. During her time there, Isley claimed to Selina that she could almost feel the plants around her. Isley stated that it was as if she could sense them. No one paid it much heed, but scientists decades later would speculate that something in Isley's physiology had changed. It is theorized that she was picking up on the chemicals plants emit when they are in danger. It was also theorized that she was possibly detecting the electrical impulses that plants send through their systems. None of this is confirmed, merely speculation. In any case, during her time with the Sirens, Isley's rage continued to grow. She wanted vengeance against Hugo Strange for his heinous actions. Isley began to plot her revenge, something that Selina did not approve of. Selina wanted Isley to begin a new life with the Sirens. Isley did not listen to her. She could not forgive, and she would not forget. Isley left the Sirens behind and returned to her old lab in the city. It had been months since she'd set foot in it. Here she gathered the resources she needed. She used her lab to concoct a deadly toxin derived from Cicuta maculata, or water hemlock, common to North America. The effects would be felt swiftly and effectively. Hugo Strange would receive a slow, excruciating death upon being exposed to the toxin. Isley wanted this. It reflected the pain that Hugo Strange had caused her. Isley had been to Strange's residence before. The professor hosted a series of functions for Gotham's scientific community. Using this knowledge, she armed herself with a syringe bearing the toxin she had devised. Isley went to Strange's home and broke in. Strange was shocked to see her there. An intruder was one thing, but having Dr. Isley, one of his test subjects, in his home filled him with terror. Hugo, seeing the syringe in her hand, tried to reason with her. He failed miserably. His narcissistic nature prevented him from reaching her. His attempts to calm her down only enraged her all the more. Isley rushed at Strange and the two struggled. Eventually, Isley managed to plunge the syringe into Strange's arm, injecting him. Strange stopped struggling, his movements becoming impaired by the poison. He collapsed to the ground, writhing in pain, as Isley ran out into the night. One of Strange's servants found him in the main foyer and called the police. By the time the authorities arrived, they discovered Strange's body, still and lifeless. After the death of Hugo Strange, Pamela Isley fled the city. The police uncovered numerous notes and journals belonging to Strange. They were included as evidence. Within the journals and notes, they discovered the horrendous actions of the professor, his experiments, his ideologies, and his callousness. It brought into question much of his work at Arkham Asylum. Within these notes, they found references to the experiments he had conducted on Dr. Pamela Isley. Because of the fact that Strange's body showed signs of a struggle, the police assumed it had been a murder. Based on physical descriptions of Pamela Isley and red hairs found at the scene of the crime, the police considered her the prime suspect. The police raided her lab in the city and found numerous incriminating pieces of evidence. They discovered remnants of water hemlock, scientific notes, the daily routine of Hugo Strange on paper, and a number of journals kept by Isley. One journal in particular held detailed plans for her attack on Strange. One of the final entries stated, "Like poison ivy, I will make him suffer. He will want to crawl out of his own skin by the time I'm through with him. Strange will pay for what he has done to me." Even after extensive searching, the police were unable to locate Isley. The newspapers, having learned about her journal entry, began to refer to her as Poison Ivy. Authorities assumed she had fled Gotham, maybe even the state. In spite of her seeming disappearance, this would not be the last that Gotham would see of Poison Ivy. Cyrus Gold, born Monday, January 12, 1852, to Elijah and Marlene Gold. He was then christened on Tuesday, January 13, 1852, in St. Caldwell's Church. Cyrus was a bigger child and was frequently mocked for his weight. He would physically lash out at his aggressors in an attempt to stop the teasing. Those who challenged Cyrus usually lost due to the sheer force the young man displayed towards his tormentors. Due to the many altercations, Cyrus was dismissed from school before ever learning to read or write. His parents were frustrated with him for this and told him he needed a job if he was not going to attend school. He found a job at the Cavendish Textile Factory. While working one day at the Cavendish Textile Factory in the lower section of Gotham, Cyrus caught sight of the owner's daughter, Tabitha, falling for her at first sight. After finally gaining the courage to ask her out, and the two courting for some time, Cyrus Gold married Tabitha Cavendish on Wednesday, March 13, 1872. It was unusual for a wedding to occur on a weekday, but it was one of the few dates that worked well for the couple. Despite his troubled upbringing, Cyrus and Tabitha built a pleasant life together for 6 years. That is, until one night. Having had many drinks after work, Cyrus got into a brawl with another man. Cyrus thought that the man had cheated him in a card game. This fight occurred outside a local bar, the Lucky Deck. The two traded many blows, and eventually, Cyrus landed the final one. He had intended to put a stop to the fight, but his intention did not matter when he realized he had struck too viciously. The man he had been fighting lay dead on the ground. This happened on May 23, 1878. Cyrus, horrified at his actions, fled the scene as quickly as he could. He seemingly escaped without anyone recognizing him as the killer. The fact that the fight had happened outside the bar gave him some anonymity. This went according to plan until Friday, September 21, 1888, when Cyrus received a letter. The letter revealed that the bartender of the Lucky Deck knew he had killed a man. The bartender, Huxley, knew Cyrus by name and said he would turn him over to the authorities unless Cyrus paid him. Huxley required Cyrus to deliver these financial payments to Slaughter Swamp. Cyrus begrudgingly agreed. He did not want his wife or anyone else to find out about this incident. At first, Cyrus managed to keep his promise and delivered payments on time, but soon Tabitha began to wonder where all their money was going. She chastised Cyrus for spending their money so freely on gambling and liquor. Cyrus didn't care much for working normal jobs, as his distrust for people only grew stronger during his extortion by Huxley. Cyrus began committing robberies to keep the bartender off his back. Cyrus would break into homes and businesses of the wealthy at night. But soon, even that wasn't enough to satisfy Huxley. In a final desperate attempt to ward the bartender off, Cyrus attempted to rob Gotham National Bank in the fall of 1889. Due to overwhelming police presence at the bank, Gold was captured, arrested, and sentenced to Blackgate Penitentiary. The papers said he did it out of greed, but no one was wiser to the true reason Cyrus needed the money. In Blackgate, a bitter Cyrus had to fend for himself. His larger size aided him in this regard. After fighting off several other prisoners, he earned himself a degree of respect, ultimately becoming the leader of the prison gangs. When Bruce Wayne was sentenced to Blackgate for the crimes of Jack the Ripper, the two had several run-ins. Cyrus, hardened by his prison experience, saw Bruce Wayne as fresh meat. Bruce merely wanted to survive. One night, Bruce started a fight with Cyrus that he used to escape. In early 1892, another riot was caused when Cyrus escaped by killing a guard and stealing his keys, using them to free himself and others. Cyrus went home to his wife, who was shocked to see him. She told him to get out and never come back. He had left her to fend for herself and broken her heart with his arrest. Cyrus moved to a home on the outskirts of Gotham to avoid being taken back into custody. Cyrus was in his new home less than a week when new letters revealed that Huxley wanted payments to continue. Huxley threatened to send enforcers if he did not make the payments. On Saturday, October 29, 1892, Gold met Huxley in Slaughter Swamp to make a usual payment. Gold finally became fed up and, in a rage, attacked Huxley, who got a hold of a shovel and beat Cyrus seemingly to death with it. Now it was Huxley's turn to panic. Extortion had now turned into murder, which was not what he had planned. On Sunday, October 30th, 1892, he took Cyrus's body to a portion of the swamp where several industrial plants let their waste drain, polluting the water and making it toxic to anything living. With that, Huxley left Cyrus for dead, assuming no one would come looking for him. No one did. Tabitha grew briefly worried upon being unable to locate him, but she assumed he had either been killed or locked up again. However, Cyrus had indeed survived and was slowly recovering. On Monday, October 30th, 1893, several teenagers passed through Slaughter Swamp for fun on Halloween to scare each other. After a year in the swamp, Cyrus's mind had been ravaged by the extensive brain damage caused by isolation and his gruesome beating. He had become like a mindless zombie focusing only on the primal instinct to survive. Stalking the swamps, Cyrus barely resembled the man he once was. His extensive time in the dark swamp left his skin a sickly pale color, his hair graying, and his eyes bloodshot. He was already a large man, and this new countenance gave him a ghastly appearance. Due to the trauma done to his brain by the shovel, Cyrus could remember nothing about his near-death experience, or how he had come to be in the swamp, or even in Gotham for that matter. When the children asked Cyrus about himself, he could only recall being born on a Monday. The kids began to laugh and jokingly refer to the man as Solomon Grundy, referring to the old poem. Finding the mocking laughter of the children enraging, Cyrus tore them apart. But unfortunately, with no name and no memory, Cyrus now knew himself only as Solomon Grundy. He fled into the swamp in fear when he realized what he had done to the children. In a cruel twist of fate, Gold had become similar to the literary character. He lived a short life as Cyrus Gold, which was troubled and ended in treachery, and then was born as Solomon Grundy, a name which, unlike Cyrus Gold, would be remembered for years after in Gotham City. After the discovery of the bodies of the children in the swamp, the police scanned the area and found no trace of the killer. The Gotham police were forced to chalk it up to a wild animal attack without further evidence. When hunters in the area began being discovered in similar mangled fashion to the children, the police turned to the Batman, who began to study the swamps and marshes. There was something singular about this killer, as he seemed to act out of pure, unbridled rage, with no calculation. The Batman's search would continue, but there would be little record of Grundy, until he re-emerged later in a dark and haunting plot, created by one of the deadliest criminal masterminds in Gotham's history. In 1893, the Gotham World Fair was finally ready to begin. People would come from far and wide to experience the wonders made available to them. The new Ferris wheel, the numerous oddities, the futuristic advances in science and society. On the cusp of this monumental event, Inspector James Gordon was up for promotion. His performance and hard work in the Gotham Police had earned him the rank of police commissioner. With this promotion came new responsibilities and new stresses. Gordon was especially worried because of the Gotham World Fair. The prospect of people coming from all over the globe to experience it overwhelmed him. Gordon knew that there would be plenty of respectable people, but he also knew there would be many who were not. Pickpockets, confidence men, and criminals of all sorts looking to make a profit. Gordon had quite the collection of achievements: the arrest of Jerome Henshaw, quelling the riot of 1892, and helping bring an end to the reign of the Ripper. In spite of these remarkable achievements, Gordon was still human. He still felt the weight of it all. He wondered if he was up to the task, but he also knew that he had an ally in all of it. Gordon knew he could rely on the help of the Batman. As final preparations began the week before the fair was to take place, the Gotham City Council convened to finalize preparations. The new fairgrounds had already completed construction. All that was left was to finalize what shows, acts, and exhibitions would be assured a slot during the fair. These proceedings were spearheaded by Mayor Tolliver. Tolliver was very vocal to the council that he wanted nothing to do with such farces as Wild West exhibitions or similar acts. Tolliver wanted the Gotham World Fair to focus on the future, the progress that was being made and that would be made. This stance made many city councilors uncomfortable. They were dubious that the fair would even bring in the crowds and profit Tolliver claimed it would. One such doubter was Rupert Thorne, the city treasurer. Thorne was very vocal that he thought Tolliver's mindset would bring them nothing but problems. Mayor Tolliver reprimanded him and everyone who shared Thorne's viewpoint. He claimed that looking to the future was exactly what the city needed, that it would entrance the masses. During Tolliver's rant, he was suddenly interrupted by a voice interjecting from behind him. A man had suddenly appeared standing in the council room window. This man wore a military garb of some kind, complete with a cloak and a sword. The man berated the councilors for claiming to know what the future was. He stated that they were nothing but daydreamers, confidence men looking to swindle the masses. Tolliver demanded to know who the man was. The man stated that his name was Alexander Leroy, and that he was the master of your future. This was met by scoffing, but before anyone could respond, Leroy continued. He told them that he demanded to be named the master of Gotham City, or he would burn it to the ground using the power of the sun. As Leroy gave them these terms, the police began to move to arrest him. Before they could reach him, however, Leroy leapt from the window out into the open air. As the police ran to the window, 2 stories above the ground, they could find no trace of Leroy. He had seemingly vanished into thin air. Numerous city officials and others had witnessed this occurrence. Bruce Wayne, James Gordon, and Ian Ashton were among those present at the time. Bruce Wayne found it worrying. The rise of so-called supercriminals in Gotham lent credence, however little, to Leroy's claims. This worry weighed heavy on Bruce's mind as he went out to dinner with his latest romantic partner, Julie Madison. Julie was an old friend of his from Gotham's socialite circle. Her father had been the owner of the first rubber factory in Gotham. It had grown him a fortune over the years, and he had been friends with Thomas and Martha Wayne. Bruce and Julie had met as children. Julie had only recently returned from time abroad, and Bruce hadn't seen her in years. The reason that Bruce had not pursued a relationship with Selina Kyle was twofold. As Bruce had continued his nightly crusade as the Batman, his strict moral code had alienated him from Selina. The other reason was that Selina's pursuits, some of them not strictly legal, made Bruce uncomfortable. The two had decided a relationship was not in their best interests. And so, with a reintroduction and a few encounters, Bruce and Julie had begun seeing each other. Julie was a very intelligent person. Her wealth had helped her pursue philanthropic avenues. Where most in her position tended towards greed and power, she sought only to make Gotham a better place. This desire of hers was what drew Bruce to her. In light of the recent intrusion by Alexander Leroy, Bruce voiced some of these worries to Julie. She listened, then told him that everything would be all right. She thought that Leroy may have been nothing but a madman. Bruce reluctantly agreed, trying to put it out of his mind. James Gordon, on the other hand, had his hands full. Tolliver had pointedly instructed him to keep Leroy out of the fair altogether, as well as prepare for any possible threats he might pose. Gordon begrudgingly set to work. If nothing else, he would strive to keep the people of Gotham safe, as well as the tourists that would be arriving soon. In an office in the heart of Gotham, Alexander Leroy met with a shadowy benefactor. The two schemed about the plan that Leroy would unfold at the start of the Gotham World Fair. This mysterious benefactor had made Leroy's vision a possibility. Using the financial support of his patron, Leroy had built an airship. This airship was outfitted with a full living quarters, multiple rope ladders, and a device of Leroy's machinations. Leroy's benefactor, having studied the work of Frederick William Herschel, helped him to design a pair of magnifying lenses that were massive in proportion. They were each 12 feet in diameter and positioned within the airship itself. They were designed to work in tandem to focus light into a concentrated beam. As the Gotham World Fair drew ever closer, Leroy's anticipation grew as well. The first day of the fair, Tolliver and other members of the city council were in high spirits. Gotham had seen an influx of tourists over the course of the previous week. something that Tolliver had correctly assumed would occur. Bruce Wayne and Julie Madison planned to attend the opening ceremony, and arrived early to the new fairgrounds the day of. Commissioner Gordon was fraught with worry on his end. Numerous panicking people had contacted the authorities, stating that there was a large object in the sky. The mayor still seemed unconcerned by the threats Leroy had made. Tolliver wanted his fair, no matter the dangers. Gordon instructed his men to be on constant watch for any threats, but they did not know what they were looking for. The police were too few in number to be everywhere during the fair. As Tolliver prepared for the opening ceremony of the fair, he was completely unaware of the looming threat. Tolliver's window suddenly shattered as Leroy leaped into the room. Leroy shot Tolliver's attendant in the head, and pointing his gun at the mayor, instructed him to follow. Leroy led Tolliver to the window where a rope ladder was waiting. The two men arrived within Leroy's airship, where Leroy began showing his captive around its interior. While he did this, the airship began to move over the new Gotham fairgrounds. Leroy eventually led Tolliver to the main bridge of the airship. There he showed Tolliver the crown jewel of this contrivance, the twin magnifying lenses. The airship was being piloted by an advanced automaton, one that Leroy's benefactor had devised. It could perform the basic function of holding the wheel and turning it upon receiving input from a telegraph station. Leroy showed Tolliver a set of controls. One of the buttons was marked Engage. Tolliver watched on in horrified fascination as Leroy pressed it. The fairgoers below were completely unawares as a beam of focused light shone down on a pavilion within the fairgrounds. Hundreds watched in terror as the pavilion burst into flames with people still inside. Bruce Wayne and Julie Madison also witnessed this. Bruce's shock turned to anger at the sudden attack. He hearkened back to Leroy's threat of striking with the power of the sun. He didn't know how, but Bruce knew Leroy was behind this somehow. On the airship, Tolliver protested the attack in horror. Leroy ignored him as the airship moved over the central building of the fair, where Tolliver's opening address was to be. Leroy pushed Tolliver out of an opening in the airship, and the mayor plummeted. With the shattering of glass, everyone inside the building watched Tolliver impact. The mayor of Gotham died instantly. Bruce Wayne also witnessed this catastrophe, becoming further enraged. As this occurred, the airship continued setting things ablaze. Alfred, who always packed a spare batsuit for Bruce, retrieved it and brought it to him. Bruce donned the suit and grabbed a prototype hang glider from a fair display. The Batman climbed to the top of the main building and, using the heat from the spreading fires, glided towards the airship. After crashing through a window in the airship, the Batman engaged Leroy in combat. In the scuffle, Leroy's automaton was damaged, and the airship began to go down. The two continued fighting while the airship fell towards Gotham Bay. The Batman managed to reach his glider and exit the airship before it crashed. Leroy remained trapped on the airship. His body was later found in the bay. The aftermath of Leroy's attack left the people of Gotham shaken, but this did not stop the fair. Deputy Mayor Quincy Sharp stepped up to lead the city and the fair through this time. The fair would continue as planned in honor of Tolliver. Both Commissioner Gordon and the Batman suspected that Leroy had received aid from a benefactor. Just who that benefactor was remained a puzzling mystery. Leroy's attack may have been a major threat to Gotham and its citizens, but he would not be the last during the duration of the fair. Some threats would be more evident than others, but the Batman would keep a sharp eye out. He was learning to expect the unexpected. Gotham and its tourists would do their best to enjoy the fair. Most would, while others would encounter unspeakable horrors. Either way, the Gotham World Fair had officially commenced. The unfortunate events in the life of Dr. Kirk Langstrom began in the year 1892. Langstrom had studied abroad in the years leading up to 1892, his career focusing on the fields of chemistry and anatomy. Langstrom had studied under a doctor in Europe, though he tended to avoid mentioning his mentor by name. Langstrom was seemingly upset whenever this topic was mentioned. Upon returning to Gotham in 1890 with his wife, Francine, Langstrom began his own studies. He became a renowned vivisectionist, one who studies primarily the nervous systems and other internal functions of living organisms by vivisecting them. Kirk and Francine were very happy, and Kirk was thriving in his career. He published numerous papers and discoveries within the scientific community of Gotham. His work mainly focused on the similarities between human and animal biology, the common factors of their chemistry and functions. By late 1891, he was lauded for his discoveries and had even been honored once or twice by Mayor Tolliver well before the mayor's untimely demise. It seemed that Langstrom's career would continue to take off, that he would become a pioneer in the field of science. But then something horrifying occurred. Langstrom discovered that he was beginning to lose his hearing. The sudden onset of deafness terrified the doctor. If he could no longer hear, he surmised that he would no longer be as effective in continuing his career, let alone supporting his family. He worried that his inability to hear would impede his ability to share his research with others. And so, Langstrom began delving deeper into his research and experimentation. With the beginning of the planning committees for the Gotham World Fair, Langstrom saw a chance to showcase his findings, as well as find potential patrons for his research and experimentation. In early 1892, he acquired funding through the head of the scientific community in Gotham, Professor Hugo Strange. Strange was familiar with Langstrom's work and jumped at the chance to aid in his work. Strange also saw to it that Langstrom would have a spot during the Gotham World Fair at which to showcase his work. This news brought Langstrom elation. He felt hope that he would be able to find a way to stave off his oncoming deafness. This elation was short-lived. With the reign of the Ripper, Gotham City saw a terror unlike any it had ever encountered. It saw the deaths of numerous citizens and the birth of monstrosities never before imagined. Some of these individuals fascinated Langstrom. His fascination quickly turned to shock when one of them, Dr. Pamela Isley, murdered Hugo Strange in the professor's own home. Upon receiving news of this unfortunate turn of events, Langstrom was shocked. He was still assured a slot at the Gotham World Fair, but his funding had taken a massive blow with the death of Professor Strange. Langstrom now had a deadline by which to have something, anything, to present at the Gotham World Fair. He assumed that he would be the laughingstock of Gotham's science community if he did not. Francine had faith in him. She encouraged him to put his best effort in. She believed in him and helped him to believe in himself somewhat. And so, with increasing desperation, Langstrom decided to set to work. He would pour his blood, sweat, and tears into his work, if it meant saving his career and his hearing. The exact nature of the scientific discoveries that Langstrom made are lost to time. Some claim that his notes were merely lost, while others argue that his research was purposely destroyed. A popular conspiracy theory is that Langstrom's notes were appropriated by a shadow government. Whatever the case, no one is absolutely certain what became of Langstrom's scientific journals and findings. Even after the fiery attack on the fair by Alexander Leroy in 1893, the Gotham World Fair still commenced. The interim mayor, Quincy Sharp, wished to honor the late Mayor Tolliver's memory by continuing with the exhibition. On top of this, there were already too many moving parts to just cancel it altogether. People had come from all over the globe to experience the fair. Langstrom's research and experimentation had consumed all of his time leading up to this point. He was very excited about his presentation. He considered it the crowning achievement of his career. He told everyone he could, family, friends, acquaintances, and such others, to be present for it. No one was prouder of his hard work than his wife, Francine. She had seen him work tirelessly to succeed in his endeavors. Francine was the loudest voice of support for him. Once the fair started, the time soon came for Langstrom's demonstration. It would take place in the fair auditorium. Langstrom was most likely nervous, but he would go forward with it. He started by explaining to his audience that he had been progressively losing his hearing. He told them that he was, in fact, currently deaf in his left ear. He used charts and illustrations to convey this. Langstrom then made the claim that his scientific discoveries would allow him to cure deafness. Upon him saying this, Francine brought out a handheld bell. Langstrom signaled to her to ring it next to his left ear, and she did. Langstrom didn't even flinch as it sounded loudly. He told everyone that he had not heard it. They invited a volunteer on stage to verify this and try it, with the same result. Langstrom then walked over to a table and pulled the cover off of a cage. Within it were 2 vampire bats. He claimed that he had been studying them and their physiologies, that they held the answer. Langstrom then picked up a syringe. He claimed that it would take an injection, just one, to cure his deafness. The audience watched with rapt attention as Langstrom prepared the syringe, then injected himself. After a couple brief moments, Langstrom told Francine to ring the bell next to his left ear again. She did, and the crowd watched Langstrom's face light up as he flinched. He exclaimed that it was a success. They had the volunteer verify this as well. Langstrom walked off the auditorium stage to rapturous applause. He had done it. Francine embraced him, exclaiming how proud of him she was. Mayor Quincy Sharp approached him too, congratulating him and inviting him to share his findings more in depth with the city's scientific community. Langstrom was overjoyed. This, unfortunately, would not last for long. Even though the demonstration had been a roaring success, Langstrom was caught by surprise the following morning. Upon awakening and looking in the mirror, Langstrom was shocked at his appearance. His hair had grown unnaturally in thickness and length. His fingers were elongated and almost claw-like. He screamed in horror, which woke up Francine. She in turn screamed in shock, not recognizing her husband at first. Langstrom ran from the room in a hurry, crashing into numerous objects in the hallway and stairwell of their home. Upon reaching his study, Langstrom doubled over in pain. He could feel his bones cracking and changing, his fingers realigning and the membranes between them stretching. Francine rushed into the study after him just in time to see the completion of his transformation. Langstrom's ears grew longer and his nose stretched into a snout. His canine teeth fell out, replaced by fangs. His pupils dilated and the whites of his eyes turned red. With a deafening screech and the use of his new wing-like appendages, Langstrom crashed through the window of his study, disappearing shakily into the sky. Francine was utterly appalled at what she had just witnessed. It was purely unthinkable and unimaginable. The exact details of what Langstrom had done to himself have been lost, but he had, in effect, become a monster. Francine contacted the authorities and the police soon came to investigate. It became clear that they did not believe her when she shared what she had seen. The inspector on the case, Bullock, took her statement down with more than one eye roll. The police started a search for the missing Langstrom, but their mistake was in looking for a man, not the creature that Langstrom had become. It wasn't long before reports started to surface of a winged creature attacking people at nighttime. Those who suffered the attacks reported bites and slashes, the size of which were very concerning to authorities. They all claimed that they were being attacked by a giant bat. Naturally, the less trusting officers within the Gotham police suspected the Batman. Upon learning of this suspicion, the Batman began his own investigation into the matter. The attacks and sightings seemed to be located in or around the western side of the city. The Batman kept watch in this area, looking for any sign of the culprit. After a couple nights of watching, he sighted a large creature gliding from building to building. Its movements were accompanied by a strange, almost rhythmic screeching, not unlike echolocation. The Batman, utilizing his own version of the hang glider from the fair, pursued the creature. As he got closer, the Batman almost couldn't believe his eyes. The creature before him was indeed bat-like, but it was much more monstrous than he could have imagined. The Batman hurled his grappling hook at the creature's legs, tangling them together. The creature shrieked at him, and the Batman was pulled along very suddenly. He discarded his glider to avoid crashing. As the creature glided, the Bat pulled himself up to the creature. The combined weight of the two of them caused them to sink lower and lower towards the ground. The Bat creature attempted to knock the Batman off of it, but the Batman dodged these attempts. As they crashed to the ground, the Batman pushed off of the creature and rolled safely to the ground. The creature impacted with a sickening thud, alive but incapacitated. The Batman restrained the creature and waited until the authorities began to arrive. He left before they could see him. He wasn't sure if he would be arrested or not due to recent suspicions. The police were baffled upon sighting the Bat creature. That is, until the review of Francine Langstrom's report. Francine was called to the police station and she confirmed that this looked to be her husband, transformed. Unsure of how to deal with these proceedings, and with the input of both Francine and the Batman, it was decided that Langstrom would be sent to Belle Reve, similarly to Waylon Jones. Langstrom would remain here for some time. As was most often the case, the newspapers had a field day with the story of the Man-Bat, as they called Dr. Langstrom. It was obviously just a play on the Batman's own moniker, but one that seemed to stick. The citizens of Gotham ate it up. The story of a bat creature on the loose both terrified and excited them. It would give way to many stories and urban legends regarding the Man-Bat. These urban legends would grow and evolve over the centuries, even into modern day. Langstrom would indeed remain at Belle Reve for some time, but would eventually escape its confines. Francine Langstrom hurt for her husband. She desperately wanted a cure to be found, but doctors and scientists were hard-pressed to discover one. Langstrom's transformation was so far outside the bounds of medical knowledge, and his notes had vanished. Francine's name became almost as well known as her husband's in Gotham for a brief time. Their tragic story left many sympathetic towards her, but as time progressed, that sympathy faded. Bruce Wayne extended his sympathies to her as well, having heard of her plight. They remained in touch, and Bruce pointed her towards Selina Kyle as a listening ear. Langstrom, or the Man-Bat, slowly regained some of the humanity his mind possessed, even relearning to speak certain words. His time at Belle Reve would prove beneficial to him, but the damage had been irreparably done. The Man-Bat had been born from an attempt to do good, but the terror he wreaked would haunt Gotham again. Gotham City was no stranger to the practice of occultism. Rumors and stories told of a secret order of occultists that had been in power since Gotham's founding. These stories lent to superstitions that carried over throughout Gotham's history, even into the late 1800s. There were many that tried to invoke these occult practices to gain power. James Craddock, Nikolai Tepes, and William McElroy, to name a few. Out of all of these people, however, none were so prominent as Joseph Blackfire. Blackfire was a transitional deacon in the Catholic Church. He hoped to enter the priesthood upon completing his training in seminary. He had been in Gotham City his entire life. As a young man, Blackfire was drawn to the spiritual. It spoke to him of a world beyond our own. Finding more knowledge of this world became his obsession. Over the years, Blackfire's desire for knowledge evolved into a desire for otherworldly power. He began to dabble in occult practices and rituals, careful to keep them a secret from his superiors. These rituals, divination, spells involving grimoires and magic weapons, were attempts to gain otherworldly power. Eventually, he was found out and severely reprimanded. Blackfire was stripped of his diaconate, laicized and expelled from active involvement in the church. Blackfire was enraged by this turn of events. He considered his superiors to be fools, obstinate towards change, and much too set in their ways. Now free of his attachment to the church, Blackfire felt free to truly delve into his occult practices. He began to hold seances and practice ceremonial magic. Blackfire sought to gain power through any means that he could. As he explored these further, he began to amass a small following. Blackfire reasoned that they would begin their own organization, and preached to his followers that they followed the true will of God. Blackfire told his disciples that through magic, they would gain enlightenment, and anything would be possible, even their darkest desires. With the official start of the planning for the Gotham World Fair, Blackfire saw a new opportunity. His followers grew in number with each passing day, but he wanted to obtain a larger platform from which to preach his message. He petitioned the Gotham City Council for a spot at the fair. Many of the council members were wary of him. One such person was Professor Hugo Strange. Strange called Blackfire's followers brainless fanatics, and he accused Blackfire of being a confidence man. Blackfire was laughed out of the council chambers. Seething inwardly, but keeping a composed exterior, Blackfire gathered his followers. He instructed them in a ritual, one that he claimed would result in the destruction of their enemies. He told his followers that God was on their side and would remove their obstacles. In this instance, it was Professor Hugo Strange. After they had completed the ritual, they waited. BLACKFIRE insisted that it would result in Strange's death. For the first few days, nothing happened. For the first 2 weeks, nothing happened. BLACKFIRE began to worry that it hadn't worked. BLACKFIRE's followers began to doubt that anything would happen to Strange, until Strange was murdered in his own home by Dr. Pamela Isley. When this news reached them, BLACKFIRE immediately capitalized on it and claimed that they had manifested this occurrence. He used it to garner trust from his followers, and his cult began to grow more and more. When he next petitioned the city council, they begrudgingly accepted his proposal. They supposed that maybe an element of spirituality would bring a sense of whimsy to the otherwise scientific aspects of the fair. Harold Faulkner, another city council member, still strongly opposed it. Mayor Sharp seemed somewhat taken with the idea. He was one of the loudest voices of support for BLACKFIRE on the council. Unlike most other exhibitions at the fair, BLACKFIRE held his showcases at nighttime. His followers would put up flyers promoting his sermons, and guests would come to experience them. Large crowds gathered to listen to him preach. BLACKFIRE would tell them that they could seize control of their lives through supernatural means. The crowds ate it up at first, but over time, the novelty of it seemed to wear off. The crowds stopped coming, and their interest in BLACKFIRE faded. This put BLACKFIRE in a grim mood. His followers watched in confusion as he locked himself in a room. He spent restless days and nights devising a solution. When he emerged, BLACKFIRE told them of his plan. When BLACKFIRE returned to the public eye, his message was different this time. When he preached his message, to a smaller crowd, he told them that he had received knowledge from God about the future. Deacon BLACKFIRE claimed that Harold Faulkner, the city councilor, would die in 2 days' time. Non-believers scoffed at this claim as BLACKFIRE conducted a public magic ritual. The news outlets began to cover the story. Faulkner had spearheaded a few small redevelopment projects. His name was well known by Gotham citizens. Faulkner was furious upon hearing this claim. He contacted Commissioner Gordon and told him to do something about BLACKFIRE. Gordon told the city councilor that he would assign some men to watch the councilor's house, but he could not do much more than that. 2 days passed. When the councilor awoke the following morning, he sat at the breakfast table with his family. They all watched in horror as Faulkner began to cough up blood. Within minutes, he was dead. As word of this incident spread, BLACKFIRE's popularity grew. People were appalled that he had seemingly predicted the city councilor's death. Deacon BLACKFIRE again capitalized on this. The police were immediately suspicious that BLACKFIRE had been somehow responsible for Faulkner's death, but they couldn't prove it. BLACKFIRE continued to accurately predict the deaths of at least 2 more public figures in Gotham. Commissioner Gordon, with his hands tied, turned to the Batman. Finding the reason for the deaths proved to be a difficult task. The Batman had many theories, but his primary one was that the deaths had been because of poison. He utilized techniques pioneered by Gene Stoss, a toxicologist, to study the bodies of the people whose deaths BLACKFIRE had predicted. It did not take long for the Batman to discover a common link in all the deaths. They had been poisoned. He theorized that Deacon BLACKFIRE had poisoned them under the guise of performing public magical rituals. After investigating more, the Batman found out how the poison had been administered. It seemed that BLACKFIRE had his most trusted followers bribe certain members of each victim's house staff. The house staff would either administer the poison themselves or allow one of BLACKFIRE's followers to pose as a staff member. The Batman obtained this information through the interrogation of one of the members of BLACKFIRE's inner circle, a cultist who was BLACKFIRE's right hand. As the Batman gathered evidence and built a case, he passed the information along to the police. He managed to gather this just in time. BLACKFIRE's latest prediction was that James Gordon would die. Before BLACKFIRE could perform the ceremonial ritual, both the police and the Batman sprang into action. BLACKFIRE's followers began fighting against the police, and the Batman went for BLACKFIRE himself. After an intense scuffle, Deacon BLACKFIRE and his cultists were subdued. They had been responsible for at least 3 deaths. BLACKFIRE and his inner circle of followers were sentenced to life in Blackgate Penitentiary. At his trial, BLACKFIRE told all present that nothing would stop him, not even death. He claimed he would take vengeance on all of them, and that God's wrath would rain down on them. He was met with laughter, but Blackfire stood silently as they all laughed. Blackfire and his cult were locked up, and the newspapers covered the story. Gotham citizens were shocked that someone who claimed the title of Deacon could be involved in something so despicable. The name of Deacon Joseph Blackfire would become infamous, and his threat of vengeance would also be seared into Gotham's memory. Many in Gotham City were becoming wary of the Gotham World Fair's penchant for attracting conmen and criminals. No matter how much care was taken, no matter how many precautions, a decent amount of people stayed well away from the festivities. This did not, however, stop people from coming from far and wide to Gotham. People from other states and countries wanted to take part in the event of the century. One person to capitalize on this was Jervis Tetch. Tetch did not have a grand display. He was not one for show. He was a peddler selling hats and books. He had cleverly modeled himself after the fictional character of the Mad Hatter in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. Tetch wore a top hat, a long frilled coat, and carried a cane. He would act eccentrically while selling his hats and books to passers-by. He was a relatively unassuming figure. Not many looked twice. Those who he did draw in spoke highly of his dedication, even if they found him a bit odd. Tetch soon found himself struggling, however. His sales were plummeting. He was finding himself lost in the noise of the Gotham World Fair. Normally, one in his situation would try to find a decent solution to this problem. Unbeknownst to most people, Tetch was not a normal person. Having grown up in a poorer part of Gotham, Tetch had scrounged for scraps and had grasped at what he could. Tetch had learned to read from the local church. They held Sunday school, open to poorer communities so that children could learn to read the scriptures. Tetch found stories fascinating, and he devoured any reading materials he could find. The works of Lewis Carroll were his favorite. He lived this way until young adulthood, when he made a new friend. A man had come to town showing off neat parlor tricks. He proclaimed himself to be Sir Isaac Bowen, a musician and performer from abroad. He would attract audiences and seemingly convince them to do things they normally wouldn't, or to behave ridiculously. The man had called himself a hypnotist. Tetch had found Bowen fascinating and had struck up a conversation with him. The two formed a fast friendship, and Bowen had begun teaching Tetch his art of performance and hypnotism. Before long, Bowen began to teach Tetch the other side of his business, how to be a confidence man. Tetch would observe and assist Bowen in tricking countless people out of their money and valuables through hypnotism. After many years of this, Tetch and Bowen had a falling out. Tetch eventually disagreed on the dishonesty Bowen employed. Tetch's conscience was weighing on him. Bowen called him naive and stated that the world was less forgiving than Tetch made it out to be. The two parted ways, and Tetch struck out on his own. Later, at the Gotham World Fair, Bowen's words rang out in Tetch's head now. Begrudgingly, Tetch began to employ the tricks of hypnotism he had learned. He would strike up a friendly conversation with a customer, establish eye contact, and then convince them to buy from his wares. This eventually escalated into convincing people to pay more than they normally would, and even just giving him their money altogether as a donation. It didn't always work, but it worked for him often enough. Tetch went on like this for a while, but then everything changed. One day, while operating his small booth at the fair, Tetch saw a woman. He was instantly smitten. He learned that this was Julie Madison, a socialite in Gotham. He became absolutely obsessed with her. Tetch likened her in his mind to Alice from the works of Lewis Carroll. He began following her, noting her daily schedule, and learning anything he could about her. Tetch was becoming unhinged. The tipping point was when he learned of Madison's fiancé, Bruce Wayne. Tetch became enraged. He was enraged at his perception of Madison's betrayal and at Wayne for being the object of her affection. Without having ever met either of them face to face, Tetch devised a scheme. He took a book in his stock, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, and hollowed it out.
Tetch stole various chemicals and components from the fairgrounds and devised an incendiary device within the hollow book. He planned to give it to Wayne and Madison as a gift the next time he saw them. He had tried to rig the device to explode once the book was opened, and so Tetch waited. After the arrest of Deacon Joseph Blackfire, the World Fair was in need of revitalization. People were wary to come back, and so the organizers took it upon themselves to be seen attending. Bruce Wayne and Julie Madison were among their number. Tetch finally seized his opportunity. He approached them with his deadly book and offered it. He used his hypnotist skills, striking up friendly conversation to lower guards, maintaining eye contact. These seemed to work on Madison, but Tetch was stalled by Wayne's demeanor. Bruce Wayne returned Tetch's gaze steadily, leading the conversation away from the topics Tetch brought up. Tetch was taken aback by this and merely gave them the book. He began walking away but stopped when he heard Wayne shout. There was a splash and then an explosion. Tetch looked back behind him to see a destroyed fountain and Wayne talking to 2 police officers and pointing at him. Tetch was taken into custody. Dubbed the Mad Hatter by local newspapers, Tetch found himself in the spotlight. He surprised himself. He utterly hated it. He was deemed insane and interred in Arkham Asylum. Here, Tetch would stew on his hatred of both Bruce Wayne and Julie Madison. He would continue concocting revenge plans and harebrained schemes, all useless if he was trapped in Arkham. Soon, he began to receive strange correspondence. The letters asked him for details of his hypnotic skills, his incendiary device within a book, and his ideologies. Tetch was more than happy to oblige, if not confusedly. He had nothing better to do. The letters were not signed with a name, merely a question mark. Tetch had no idea who this person was, but he soon began to see them as a friend. He referred to this friend as his White Rabbit. Tetch knew that if he just waited, it was only a matter of time before this White Rabbit showed him a way out. And so, he would wait. Many shouts could be heard from vendors and showcases at the Gotham World Fair. Tourists and fairgoers who came from far and wide were more than happy to answer these attempts at selling a service or invention. Over many of these shouts, one could be heard. Come one, come all, and see the electrical spectacle of brilliant inventor Maximilian ZEUS. Many entered the structure, built to represent ancient Greek architecture, being advertised by a man dressed as Hermes, the messenger of the gods. Upon entering, a curtained stage stood before their eyes as they took a seat on wooden benches. After waiting a matter of minutes, long enough for the structure to fill, the curtains finally drew back. They revealed a middle-aged man with striking features. This man proclaimed himself to be Maximilian ZEUS, a brilliant inventor and innovator. He claimed to be able to harness the one true power of the gods, electricity. Citing his experience with the works of Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison, ZEUS revealed his latest invention. Pulling back a sheet, he revealed a device resembling a Tesla coil. He claimed that he had started with Tesla's design and modified it to make it even better. Donning a rubber gauntlet, ZEUS activated the coil and held a conductor rod near it. He told the captivated speculators that he would now wield the power of the gods in a display. His assistant brought out a metal target and stepped out of the way. ZEUS claimed he would now direct the electricity to the target. As he moved to do so, something happened that ZEUS had not predicted. The golden watch in the pocket of a bystander conducted the electricity wielded by ZEUS. With a sharp zap and the smell of singed flesh, the speculators ran from the structure, screaming. ZEUS sank to his knees in shock as he stared at the burning, twitching body of the pocket watch's owner. Prior to this harrowing event, Maximilian ZEUS had been deeply involved in the electrical revolution. ZEUS had grown up in America. As a young boy, he had always been fascinated with tales of the Greek gods and their heroes. As he grew older, this fascination sparked a desire to create in him. ZEUS was a dabbler in spiritualism and neo-paganism. He became an inventor. In adulthood, Zeus had stood with Nikola Tesla for most of what would later become known as the War of the Currents in the 1880s. Zeus struck out on his own after several disagreements over designs and safety. Tesla wanted to stress the safety of alternating current electricity, and Zeus wanted to fight fire with fire against Edison's fear-mongering tactics. Thomas Edison had been attempting to demonstrate AC electricity's danger by using it to electrocute animals. Zeus wanted to use publicity to fight back in kind. Tesla disagreed with this, and the two parted ways. After seeing the success that Tesla and George Westinghouse had without Zeus's help, he became hell-bent on proving his own tactics and ideas effective. After years and years of his own hard work and funds, he created the showcase he unveiled years later at the Gotham World Fair. With the death of one of the spectators, his dreams of rivaling Tesla and Edison crumbled before his very eyes. After numerous bouts of police questioning, they determined it had been an accident. He was given a very severe warning by the police and by the city council. His license to operate at the fair was revoked, and he was banned from the fairgrounds. With this, something within Maximilian ZEUS broke. He found himself riddled with guilt, sorrow, anger, and despair. In desperation, he turned to the one thing he knew: electricity. Rigging a chair with electrical trappings, Zeus attempted to build the very thing he had seen Edison encourage in the inventor's smear campaign against AC current. Zeus built an electric chair. He intended to use it on himself so that he would no longer have to feel the anguish he was experiencing. He would only have to use it once to bring an end to it all. As he sat in the chair and activated the electric current, he immediately regretted it. As the electricity surged through his body, he spasmed uncontrollably. Suddenly, his device shorted out and the electric current stopped. Zeus scrambled out of the chair to the floor. As he regained his faculties, he stared at the chair. He realized that his thoughts had calmed, that his resolve had focused. He looked at the electric chair he had built and saw it as a throne. In his own mind, the electricity had cleansed him and helped him to see his own true nature. He thought back to the stories and myths of legend he had loved so much. He fancied himself to be favored by the gods, or even among their number. He thought to himself it was no coincidence that his surname was that of the king of the gods. In his delusion, he thought that electricity held the power to ascend a person to godhood. After more preparations, he subjected himself to more electroshock sessions. With each one, his delusion grew and grew. Eventually, he believed that he was fully Zeus. But when he looked around his laboratory, he was alone. He felt a burning desire, one to bring the rest of his pantheon to this twisted reality he envisioned. When police received a call to a warehouse owned by Maximilian ZEUS, they rushed to the location. The caller was a dock worker using the company line, recently installed, who claimed he had stumbled upon something remarkably terrifying. The scene that the police entered was nothing short of horrific. In a style much like the painting Minerva and the Triumph of Jupiter by René-Antoine Huas, a grisly scene lay before them. Maximilian ZEUS, clad in a toga, sat drinking wine atop a structure he had built. Surrounding him were the corpses of multiple victims, all bearing severe burns and electrocution marks on their skin. He had lured these victims off the streets with promises of paid work. Zeus seemed unaware of the morbidity of his surroundings. He was fully lost in some sort of twisted revelry. The police took Maximilian ZEUS into custody, and he was eventually interred in Arkham Asylum for further evaluation. The city council, having heard of this, kept it quiet because of the fact that Zeus had already caused a tragedy at the Gotham World Fair. Bruce Wayne and Julie Madison were opposed to this, but they were outvoted. Madison in particular thought it was a hubristic call to make, and was angry with the city councilman. Zeus, now in Arkham, was evaluated and determined to have delusions of grandeur. The staff at the asylum decided to treat him with, ironically, electroshock therapy. This only served to deepen Zeus's resolve in his new identity. Zeus had his sights on one person in particular, someone who he deemed in his mind to be the Hades to his Zeus. This person was the elusive Batman. Zeus longed for the day he would clash with his so-called brother, and knew that it would be a reckoning to rival that of the gods and the Titans. Roman Sionis was the inheritor of the Sionis Steel Company and the son of businessman Richard Sionis. Roman's family was wealthy, so he never wanted for anything. Roman's difficulties did not stem from poverty or disparity. His difficulties stemmed from the strictness enforced by his father. Richard was an unforgiving and uncompromising man. Roman's mother, Henrietta, was a passive comfort to him, but did not stand up to his father during Richard's rages. If Roman ever disobeyed his father, spoke back to him, or looked at him the wrong way, his father would beat him. Richard Sionis's rage toward his son went beyond that. Richard was obsessed with masks and medieval contrivances. He had a collection of various masks, ceremonial, traditional, cultural, and otherwise. Accompanying this was his collection of torture instruments from medieval times and other time periods. Richard possessed an Iron Maiden device, a scold's bridle, a torture rack, and more. In especially dark fits of rage, Richard would put the scold's bridle on Roman's head, keeping the boy from speaking with the mask's spike compressing his tongue. Roman hated his father for it, but Henrietta would do nothing about it, so Roman stayed silent and tried his best to keep his head down throughout childhood. Roman learned only hatred and anger from his father. Roman's only consolation was his exploration of Gotham City. Roman would leave his family's mansion and pretend to be just another child living on the street. Roman made friends and enemies alike with the other children living here. He gained a reputation with a small group of children as being exceptionally ambitious. He felt that this was a mask of his own, one his father couldn't possess or control. Upon reaching adulthood, Roman hoped that his life would be different. His father had other plans. Upon finding some libertine literature amongst Roman's belongings, Richard told Roman that he was nothing but an embarrassment. The philosophy of behaving without moral principles or a sense of responsibility angered Richard, ever the businessman. In spite of Henrietta's and Roman's objections, Richard had Roman committed to Arkham Asylum in 1876. In an effort to conceal the scandal of a Sionis being committed, Richard had a mask created for his son to wear while incarcerated. Roman was forced to wear this mask, a rule enforced by the founder and warden at the time, Amadeus Arkham. During his incarceration, Roman continued reading libertine literature and studying on the very torture devices his father owned. Roman's resentment towards his father boiled into a rage. It wasn't until 1880 that Roman was able to escape this confinement with a bribe to an up-and-coming professor named Hugo Strange. Strange drew up Roman's release papers and removed his mask. Roman kept the mask and left Arkham. His first stop was to his family's manor. Donning the metal mask again, he entered. He walked past the protesting butler and up the stairs to his father's study. He slammed the doors open. Richard sat at his desk, jumping to his feet as Roman entered the room. Richard recognized the mask and began berating his son once again. Roman's rage exploded into decisive action. He strode to his father and grabbed Richard by the shirt. He dragged Richard to the Iron Maiden in the corner of the room and shoved his father into it. Roman slammed the contraption shut and locked it. He stood back, reveling in the screams and protestations of his father. Roman stood there until the screaming stopped and blood trickled out from the torturous device. He walked to his father's desk and sat down. The Sionis industrial empire would now be his. The following years were a tumultuous time for the Sionis industrial empire. Roman covered up his father's murder by stating that he had died in an unfortunate accident at one of the company factories. He stepped into his father's role and began a series of ventures to diversify the company's business. Under Roman's leadership, Sionis Steel Company started numerous other ventures like Janus Cosmetics. It was a personal favorite of disgraced actor Basil Carlo for years. But they all had one common issue. The more that the company branched out, the more they cut corners to stabilize the industrial empire. One example of this was the use of white phosphorus in some products produced by Janus Cosmetics. Because Basil Carlo had used their products so much, his eventual disfigurement was inevitable. It led to the creation of the criminal and murderer named Clayface. Roman paid a hefty sum to cover up this fact, and Janus Cosmetics soon discontinued the use of white phosphorus in their products. Apart from shady business dealings, Roman secretly endeavored in criminal activities as well. Utilizing his mask from his imprisonment, he took on a new persona as Black Mask. In Gotham's criminal underworld, that name quickly became feared. People who crossed Black Mask were often found dead in various states of torture. Steel recreations of medieval torture methods were Black Mask's signature way of dealing with competitors and rivals. Black Mask created a crime syndicate called the False Face Society that carried out his wishes while Roman Sionis led his company. This carried Sionis well into the return of Bruce Wayne to Gotham and the sudden appearance of the Batman. Black Mask was furious with the Batman's meddling in Gotham. Near as Black Mask could tell, the Bat was not fully aware that he had been affecting the crime lord's operations. The Batman had taken down numerous members of the False Face Society unwittingly. Black Mask found himself desperate to regain control somehow. The Gotham World Fair was now in full swing, and Sionis wanted the Bat's incursions to stop.
When someone came to him, a masked individual, offering to take care of Black Mask's Bat problem, Sionis jumped at the opportunity.
He gave this individual a hefty sum to do so. This individual thanked him, and Sionis asked who they were. The masked individual merely answered, "In shadows I dwell where the night takes its flight. With wings like a whisper, I vanish from sight. In games of the mind I move with great skill, masked in my puzzles, your patience I'll thrill. On a board where the kings and the queens often play, I twist every thought, leading minds far astray. Who am I that dances in riddles and jest? Solve me, dear friend, and you'll find I'm the best." Without even waiting for an answer, the individual left. Black Mask shrugged it off as eccentricity. He did not care who got rid of the Batman, just that it would be done. Sionis would wait and watch for his investment to come to fruition, and would continue helping oversee the Gotham World Fair with the other council members. It was after all a new era of business and advancement in Sionis' mind. And Sionis would be damned if he saw that ruined by a vigilante in a mask.
In the shadows of 19th century Gotham, a mysterious figure emerged from the crime-shrouded fog of despair. Arnold Wesker, a puppeteer. He modeled himself after great puppeteers of his time. Wesker was once a renowned performer, his marionettes enchanting audiences with their realistic movements. He had the ability to cast his voice in such a way that it sounded as if it was coming from other places, or even his own puppets. His gift for ventriloquism drew crowds. He and his sister Patricia traveled with a group of performers. All was going well, but his life went dark after a deadly fire burned down his troupe. This left him scarred in body and mind. In the fire and ash, Wesker lost track of his sister. He could not find her no matter how hard he tried. Haunted by shame and madness, he created a wooden dummy from the charred remains of his puppets, which he named Scarface, after the abnormal burn scar which bisected its face. Scarface was not a regular puppet, though. Wesker's fractured mind believed that the dummy was in fact alive, but lived a life of brutality and tyranny. Scarface had no respect for Wesker, denigrating him as weak and useless, yet prodding him to carry out flagrant crimes. Together they were a classic duo, their exploits ringing equally in the same tune as the anarchy of the frontierless world, only with a disgusting spin that raised shivers along the spines of Gotham's citizens. Wesker and Scarface terrorized Gotham from the very start of their reign, beginning with a brazen train heist. The job was so meticulously planned that it earned Wesker the nickname the Ventriloquist. Disguised as a traveling performer, Wesker boarded a luxury train bound for Gotham, his puppet hidden in an old trunk. As the train rumbled down the countryside, Scarface's voice, a rasping snarl that seemed to emanate from the void, told Wesker to steal the gold stored in the cargo car. Wesker, a battle-hardened Civil War veteran when he was a young man, knew the techniques of strategy and logistics, but Scarface told them what to do. The robbery was successful, but it cost them dearly. Scarface's vicious commands led to the killing of several guards, leaving Wesker racked with guilt and helplessness. With each kill command from Scarface, Wesker's soul would perish somewhat, yet he was helpless to disobey the dummy's directives. The robbery thrust the duo to fame, their legend growing with each new telling, as was the case with the tales of other notorious criminals of the time. With each heist after that, their criminal reputation skyrocketed. However, in contrast to the roughnecks of the frontier, the crimes of Wesker were dramatized, as if every move was made for an unseen audience. The authorities were hard-pressed to pin the ventriloquist down. The city council and Mayor Sharp hired the Pinkerton Detective Agency to help put a stop to the criminal's reign of terror. As the ventriloquist's infamy increased, whispers of his deeds reached the ears of the Batman. The Bat prowled Gotham's gaslit alleys under cover of darkness. Learning of the stories of the mad puppeteer and his wooden accomplice, the Batman went about unraveling the threads of Wesker's past. He discovered that Wesker was once a protege of a famous puppeteer whose marionettes were said to be so lifelike they moved on their own. Wesker, however, was expelled after being accused of appropriating his master's secrets, a treachery that had smoldered in Wesker's mind. The Bat also uncovered a malevolent connection. Scarface had been crafted from the same wood as a marionette once owned by a toy maker, whose puppets were rumored to have a mysterious, near-magical life force. They had been supposedly crafted in the colonial days, carved from the trees used to hang criminals for their crimes. These very puppets had somehow been acquired by Wesker before the fire that destroyed his troupe. He had crafted Scarface from their remains. In the midst of the ventriloquist's crime spree, the Pinkerton Detective Agency had already begun an investigation into him. They had been working diligently to dismantle Scarface's gang, their detectives closing in on the cunning duo, day by day. The Pinkertons weren't the only ones on the criminal's tail. The showdown between the Batman and the ventriloquist occurred in an empty theater on Gotham's outskirts. Wesker thought that Scarface was the actual criminal mastermind and prepared one final show, a gold reserve robbery. As the Bat plummeted out of the rafters, Wesker's dummy seemed to come to life, its wooden joints jerking with unnatural energy. You can't stop us, Bat, Scarface screamed, his voice echoing in the empty hall. But the Batman, a veteran crime fighter by now, had come prepared. He came swinging with lightning justice and knocked Scarface wide open, hollow shell and all, snuffing out the dummy's devilish voice. Wesker, crushed and sobbing, fell on the floor, his mind now free from the cruel puppet. As the Bat headed for the door, a sudden shot went off. Wesker's body jerked and fell to the ground, a crimson pool of blood spreading around him. Out of the shadows emerged a Pinkerton agent, his smoking revolver clutched in his hand. "Justice is served," the agent said, storing his revolver. The Bat looked on in shock, surmising that the agent had followed him. The Batman moved to disarm the Pinkerton agent, but more of them appeared. The vigilante, weighing his options, vanished into the night, leaving behind the corpse of the ventriloquist and the shattered remains of Scarface. Whispers circulated during the following weeks of the return of a new ventriloquist in the Gotham underworld. Some attributed it to Wesker returned from the dead. Others, some of the witnesses, testified to a woman and her new Scarface marionette. The Batman, ever vigilant, watched in the shadows, fully cognizant that the legend of the ventriloquist was far from over. The tale of Arnold Wesker was a warning, a story of a man lost to the wood and the whispers, only to meet a sudden and brutal end. The Pinkerton agent who had shot Wesker, James Corrigan, was lauded as a hero by the city. Decades later, some speculate that Wesker's dummy inspired gangster Al Capone's nickname of Scarface. Regardless, after the ventriloquist's rampage, the strings of fate still tugged from the shadows, and the curtain was raised on a new act in Gotham's endless drama of crime. Professor Pig's tale of horror reads like some kind of grotesque reworking of the Pygmalion myth, where the legendary sculptor sought to perfect his ivory work by divine touch. Gotham's own mad sculptor sought to create the perfect person by blade. Dr. Laszlo Valentin arrived in Gotham in 1868, a doctor who thought of himself more as a flesh sculptor. As Pygmalion did when he was appalled by the flaws of mortal women and turned his eyes instead to crafting his perfection out of marble, so too Valentine was disgusted by the flaws of his patients. His early career at Gotham General Hospital was technically impeccable, but his colleagues winced at how he would scold a patient's crooked face even as he stitched their wounds shut. By 1875, his obsession with beauty perfection overbled into madness. He began making unauthorized corrections on comatose patients, straightening noses that were a little off, removing moles, repositioning jaws. When he was eventually dismissed, he did not just vanish. Rather, just as Pygmalion took a step back from his statue, so too did Valentine become obsessed with a grander work, the purification of Gotham itself. Valentine decided to use his talents in a different way. He opened a butcher shop. The genial neighborhood butcher on 14th and Grundy Street was, for years, a local institution, ever impeccably dressed in his soiled bow tie, white dress shirt, and striped apron, whistling along to opera records played in his shop. But out of sight, behind the counter, where gas lamps glinted off cleavers and meat hooks, Professor Pig reigned over a far cruder trade. Customers with minor imperfections, the woman with the lazy eye, the man who lisped, the rude drunk who insulted his prices, would be asked into the back room for a special cut. There, among the copper and formaldehyde smell, Pig would work singing Don Giovanni tunes as he perfected his living art. Like the pigs he despised so much, those filthy, snorting creatures who rolled around in their own filth, he saw the imperfect as being less than worthy of existence. His victims, those wretched piggies, were never simply killed. They were altered, their flaws cut away until they conformed to his warped ideal. When the Batman ultimately discovered his abattoir studio in 1892, they did not simply find corpses, but exhibitions. One group after the next like artifacts, their mouths fixed into benevolent smiles, their imperfections erased by cruel surgery. Pig's methods bore the chill reality of a man who saw himself as both artist and butcher. He was methodical as a surgeon, but employed the tools of an abattoir. Ice picks for fine-tuning, meat hooks for hanging, cleavers for the coarse work. Police would remark years later on the eerie parallels with Robert Pickton, Canada's pig farmer serial killer who buried his victims among his pigs. Criminology students today debate whether or not Pickton was inspired by the horrors wreaked by Professor Pig. Pig also enjoyed the usefulness of pigs, their hunger, their omnivorous digestion. Why waste good meat, he'd chuckle while he was being interrogated, although nobody could determine what became of the missing pieces. His crimes were as much philosophical as sadistic, a bizarre send-up of perfectionism when the pursuit of perfection permitted any atrocity. Even in Arkham, he was the master painter, sketching out anatomy diagrams and margins of his Bible, muttering about work left undone. When guards overheard him speaking to an invisible cellmate, one who seemingly only spewed riddles, they attributed it to Pig's madness. But a few who listened more acutely picked out a new resonance to Pig's humming. No longer opera alone, but an old nursery rhyme about a man who played games. Now the old butcher shop is empty, windows boarded up, floors still bearing the scars of where the police had ripped out the tiles. Gotham, though, is too smart to think the story is over. Some nights when the wind blows in just the right direction, the reek of antiseptic and rotting meat still wafts from the sewers by the old stockyards. The Batman stalks through those tunnels, his shadow darting by flesh hooks abandoned to swing in the shadows. And in Arkham's records, this intriguing note on Pig's file, a one-page piece, not signed, with nothing but a riddle. What's never finished, but always complete? What's never punished, though it kills the elite? The guards say Pig laughed when he read it. Laughter and laughter, until it became more like a song.
the Iceberg Lounge did not simply occupy Gotham's waterfront, it was Gotham's waterfront. By 1894, Oswald Cobblepot had adapted his criminal endeavors into the city's already corrupt infrastructure. Behind its marble facade and verde-saturated salons, the lounge operated with glacial precision. Waiters traded ciphered game tickets in false champagne bottle bottoms. Pier-side shipments of Antarctic ice concealed opium crates. And Cobblepot's reputation for umbrella weapons, acid-spewing canes, cane swords, and pneumatic dart shooters, was standing by in gilt umbrella stands like sentinels. Cobblepot's real genius was in his ability to compartmentalize the different aspects of his life. The Iceberg Lounge's 3 subterranean levels mirrored his mind. The first for corruption and vice, the second for forgery and gun running, the third, approached by only a hidden elevator, his room of obsession. Cobblepot kept blueprints of Wayne Tower there, and the walls in this room enshrined his father's, Tucker Cobblepot's, original umbrella as a sacred relic. Cobblepot not only ruled his criminal enterprise with an iron fist, but also made sure he had plenty of strings to pull. Cobblepot had the name of every alderman who called at every less-than-reputable parlor. He had on record which ship's masters alter manifests, and which hostess at the society sells jewels to cover her husband's losses. The Iceberg was more aquarium than club, and every patron from duke to dock worker was a fish bound for his net. Cobblepot's retaliation against Roman Sionis revealed the bird of prey Cobblepot was beneath his facade of the perfect gentleman. When Sionis inadvertently produced his own father's 1862 sabotage of Tucker Cobblepot's umbrella company venture, Oswald's reaction was instantaneous, poetic, and bird-like. Sionis wasn't just injured by Cobblepot, he was curated for an audience to witness. Roman Sionis was found with his hands tied out to either side of him, unconscious and severely wounded. His feet dangled beneath him as the steel magnate hung suspended over a 15-foot drop outside a company factory. Sionis survived, but not before experiencing horrendous pain. Commissioner Gordon saw the characteristic flourish in the signature of this crime, the same fastidious sadism which disfigured victims of Cobblepot's alleged umbrella guns had experienced. This act was a clear message to other criminals in Gotham. There is a new player in town. Cobblepot had grown from a simple blackmailer to a criminal kingpin. His power now extended from the harbor customs men to the precinct house lockers for evidence. Everything was further bolstered by Iceberg Lounge profits. The Penguin moved swiftly and silently, like a bird of prey waiting patiently until the last moment to catch its quarry. But in spite of Cobblepot's seeming success, cracks fissured the Iceberg Lounge's frosty foundations. Cobblepot's excessive reliance on spectacle had spawned an unanticipated vulnerability. Like philosophies tend to attract like personalities. Whispers began on the streets of signs carved in phosphorescent green on walls near the lounge. A derisive question mark, a chess knight, an hourglass, accompanied by mocking couplets referencing the flightless bird's gilded cage. Cobblepot openly scorned these childish taunts, secretly doubling his men's patrols of their territory. Cobblepot's operations began to experience seemingly plotted interruptions. Gambling books faked to indicate impossible losses, priceless artifacts replaced with inexpensive copies stamped with that same emerald question mark. This assailant did not challenge Cobblepot's bodily strength, but his mind, the same one he deployed against Gotham's bourgeois. The Penguin's empire was built on everybody keeping secrets. This challenger to the Penguin seemed to know Cobblepot's. While autumn fog enveloped the docks, Cobblepot strode at his lounge's top window, monocle glinting above the harbor. Before him, Gotham buzzed with pawns and prey, but in the gloom of the gaslight, there gathered other shapes. A playing card stuck within the lounge's doorway by a dart with a tip of titanium.
The crows agitated upon their roosts, sensing a tempest no umbrella could keep at bay. Cobblepot preferred to reside in black waters, but something else explored those depths. Something that does not swim. Something that formulates. And for the first time, the penguin's grip on his silver cane appeared not like power, but a man poised to collapse. The 1893 Gotham's World Fair was meant to be the city's triumphant entry into the modern age, a brilliant gold city showcasing human progress. But from its very first days, a shadow fell across the exhibition halls. Commissioner Gordon found a playing card, the Ace of Spades, laying in a shallow grave outside of the fair with a knife, a question mark carved on the blade. This was the first public challenge of the individual that the papers had dubbed the Riddler. Gordon recognized that the assault on Oswald Cobblepot's interests prior to this had been the precursor to this larger game. The Riddler's goal was not just the fair, but the very principle of order it represented. Gordon had one suspect in mind. E.N. Ashton, the wealthy English financier, was a nagging, smirking presence at planning sessions for the fair, offering veiled criticisms of the security arrangements. He had cultivated the increasingly unstable Harvey Dent, whispering in his ear that the fair was a tribute to the falsehoods of men like Bruce Wayne. Gordon had no concrete evidence to pin down on Ashton, but Gordon had developed a keen sense for foul play in his years on the Gotham police force. He shared his thoughts on this, and specifically the playing card outside the fair, with the Batman. Each of the Riddler's incursions were acts of intellectual vandalism, and as the fair progressed, the incursions increased in their frequency. One day, the fair's enormous automaton Viking ship exhibit was found chugging along a lake of green-dyed water, its toy Viking warriors deployed to hold signs saying, "Who am I?" Another day, the entire Gotham history display had been meticulously redecorated to imply Wayne and Cobblepot wealth were founded on butchery and pillage. Both Bruce Wayne and Oswald Cobblepot, two of the fair's biggest donors, were furious at this. Every gag was prefaced with a riddle, presented on specially printed cards, making fun of the powers that be's deafness to the starkly evident. Bruce Wayne, who was present at the fair with his fiancée, the smart and philanthropic Julie Madison, witnessed in growing dismay. He explained to Julie that this was not like Professor Pig's violence or the Penguin's greed. This was a calculated attempt at humiliation and at exposing. Julie expressed concern as well, but reassured Bruce that they should have faith that the situation would be resolved. Bruce agreed with Julie, but his interpretation of her words meant taking matters into his own hands. As the Batman, his quest led him to the recently opened hotel on the edge of the fairgrounds, the Labyrinthine Hotel. An engineering marvel of the modern age, it was a huge, dizzying structure of revolving corridors, blind alleys, and rooms with no visible purpose. Ian Ashton owned it, and Ashton was more than willing to give the Bruce Wayne a tour with pride, basking in the building's complexities.
A man without puzzles is like a room without furniture,
Ashton quipped, his eyes twinkling. Ashton's words indicated a keen intellect, but Bruce noticed other things about Ashton that didn't add up. Ashton took a couple wrong turns over the course of the tour, even if he managed to get them back on track. Bruce's keen observations caught a whiff of a trap, but found nothing illegal here, merely a love of games and bewilderment that also doubled as a place for tourists to stay during the fair. He left with the disturbing feeling that the hotel itself was a riddle, and Ashton one of its components.
After this investigation, the puzzles and incidents at the fair soon escalated from chaos to terror. The fair's electrical system failed, and Gotham City was plunged into darkness. When the lights were restored, the mayor's aide was found in the Hall of Inventors, locked inside a giant, transparent puzzle box, which was slowly filling with water. A riddle was left on the wall. I have cities, but no houses. Forests, but no trees. Water, but no fish. What am I? As the police labored to figure out the physical puzzle to save the man, Bruce Wayne, watching from the crowd with Julie, had the realization. The answer was a map. The crime was a map of the Riddler's mind and his scheme to remap Gotham in his image. After excusing himself and accessing a stash of his nearby, Bruce suited up as the Batman and helped the police solve the puzzle, saving the mayor's aide. As the police thanked the Batman, the Bat turned to face the crowd. He first saw the face of Ian Ashton, twisted in rage, staring back at him from the crowd. The Bat watched Ashton realize that he had been seen by the masked vigilante and turned to leave the scene. The second face he saw was that of Julie Madison staring back at him. Beneath his cowl, Bruce could feel her eyes burning into him. Julie had a look of awe and stark recognition on her face. Bruce knew in that moment that, in his haste, he had made it very clear to Julie what his true nature was. The Batman left the scene, knowing that he would need to have that conversation with Julie, and also knowing that Ian Ashton's undertakings needed a closer look. Suspicious of Ian Ashton's reaction to the mayor's aide being rescued, the Batman returned to Ashton's business. His investigation grew to a theatrical showdown at the Labyrinthine Hotel. The hotel interior struck the Batman differently this time. The layout had drastically changed, and the Bat could almost have sworn that the configuration of rooms was shifting constantly. Some of the rooms were deadly in nature. The Bat found himself trapped in a room with blades swinging from the ceiling and had to maneuver his way past them. He found himself trapped in another room that was airtight and beginning to fill with gas. He escaped by using his brass knuckles to pound his way out of the room. The maze-like corridors of this hotel only added to the confusion and chaos that the Batman experienced. Through grueling trial and error, the Batman determined that the beating heart of this hotel was the boiler room. There he discovered Ian Ashton, not elegant and intellectual, but crazed and manic. Covered in blueprints and detailed models of the fair, Ashton raved about proving his intellectual superiority.
They all thought I was nothing. A clerk, a nobody. I have orchestrated this symphony of chaos.
The Batman easily overpowered him, the evidence clear in his mind. Ashton's diaries detailed all the crimes, his possession of the green dye and puzzle devices a certainty. As the police arrived, Ashton became silent. The Batman asked him why he had done this, attacking the fair, constructing this hotel. Ashton merely smirked, stating that the Batman was asking the wrong question. Ashton was committed to Arkham, muttering that the game wasn't even halfway over. With Ashton in custody, Gotham breathed a sigh of relief. The fair continued and a sense of normalcy returned. Bruce Wayne, however, was plagued by the inconsistencies in his investigation. The riddles had a cruel, elegant wit that Ashton's frantic boasting lacked. It had not been lost on Bruce that Ashton himself had gotten turned around at times while giving him a tour of the hotel. Visiting Ashton in Arkham, the Batman found a broken man muttering about what gave him the ideas for his sabotage of the fair, what had guided his hand.
The final riddle is the solver,
Ashton whispered, before descending into incoherence. Bruce dismissed it as the ravings of a madman, but the seed of doubt was planted. Bruce begrudgingly dismissed this as the attacks on the fair had ceased. Meanwhile, his fiancée, Julie Madison, was a pillar of strength, using her family's resources to help fund the fair's recovery. She used her family's charitable trust, the Gotham Madison Funds, to help aid the city's recovery. She also volunteered at shelters for the poor displaced by the city's rapid growth. Her intelligence and compassion seemed the perfect antidote to the Riddler's nihilism. Bruce found himself extremely grateful for her. Not long after Ashton's arrest, Bruce approached Julie and they made plans to finalize their engagement. They planned to get married after the fair had concluded. In spite of his initial tabling of the inconsistencies in his investigation, Bruce could not help but return to them. The Batman's continued investigation into the hotel's ownership papers revealed a string of shell companies, but one name appeared with curious frequency as a silent investor, a trust that was abbreviated simply GMF. Bruce knew of only one such fund in Gotham and acted accordingly. Returning to Julie's apartment in the city, he found Julie in the parlor there. Confronting her, Bruce Wayne voiced his suspicions gently, fearing for her safety. He told her that he knew that the Gotham Madison funds had helped refurbish the Labyrinthine Hotel. Julie calmly explained that it was a simple investment in urban renewal, a project she had hoped would be a legacy for their future together. She stated that she could have had no idea that it would be bought by a maniac. Julie turned the conversation back to Bruce, expressing concern for his obsession with the captured Riddler, urging him to let the past go and focus on their upcoming marriage and life together. She told him that she knew he was the Batman. She told him that she didn't necessarily disapprove of his choice to wear a mask and fight crime. But Julie, with tears in her eyes, told him that she was scared for his life. Her reasoning was impeccable and her demeanor sincere. Bruce consoled her, telling her that he would be fine. She asked him to leave and wanted some space to think. Bruce left, apologizing and wishing her a pleasant evening. His doubts had been soothed by her sincerity, but his guilt at accusing her of being involved in Ian Ashton's plans weighed heavily on him. Just as Gotham had begun to breathe easy with the arrest of Ian Ashton, a corpse was found in the main promenade of the fairgrounds. A businessman had been impaled through the chest with a cane resembling the shape of a question mark. It was the owner of the Ace Playing Card Company, Philip Kane. James Gordon and the Batman investigated the scene, and Bruce realized that this was far from over. The only clue at the scene was a note. It was addressed to the Bat. It simply read, "Ace in the Hole," and was signed E.N. The Batman thought of that first incident, the playing card laying in a shallow grave at the start of this all. He surmised that the Riddler had been hinting at this murder from the start, but who, if Ashton was still in Arkham, was responsible for this murder? The Batman left a confused Gordon at the crime scene and rushed to Arkham. When he arrived there, however, he found the guards unconscious and E.N. Ashton dead in his cell, covered in blood. Scrawled in blood on the walls were the words, "Wrong again." Before he could react, the Bat felt a painful impact on the back of his head. His vision swam as he hit the floor, but he could feel his consciousness fading. He heard footfalls behind him as a silhouette loomed over him.
Ashton was a fascinating student, but so limited. He thought the game was about winning.
A voice said. It continued.
But you and I both know that it's about revealing the ace in the hole.
This was the last thing the Batman heard before his vision went dark, and he fell into unconsciousness. When the Batman awoke, he was tied to an operating table. As he looked around, he realized that he was once again within the Labyrinthine Hotel. As he strained against the chains wrapped around him, a figure stood up from a darkened corner of the room. The figure walked towards him slowly, the light illuminating them. They wore a bowler hat, a mask, and a long coat. The Batman strained to see the figure as they reached up to remove their mask.
"Hello, Bruce,"
a familiar voice said. Julie Madison, her eyes gleaming with a cold light Bruce had never seen, revealed her true identity. She was the architect of the chaos, the mind behind the Riddler. Ian Ashton had been a pawn,
an easily manipulated narcissist she had met through her charity work, whose resentment she weaponized. She had fed him the ideas, the riddles, the blueprints for the hotel's tricks.
All of Gotham's monsters are men.
She stated, pacing the stage.
Pig, cobblepot, dent. They act out of rage or greed or pride. So brutish. I wanted to create a crime of pure intellect, to prove that the greatest prison is the one made of lies, and the only escape is the truth.
Bruce was utterly in shock as all of the pieces fell into place. Julie had instructed Ashton to corrupt Harvey Dent. Julie had written to Laszlo Valentine during his incarceration. The EN that had signed the note that led him here had not been Ashton. It was the last two letters of Julie's first and last name. Julie, the true Riddler, led a stunned Bruce on a forced tour of her masterpiece by wheeling the table he was on through the hotel. The Labyrinthine Hotel was her murder castle. She showed him hidden passages behind walls, rooms with gas jets designed to asphyxiate occupants, and chutes that led directly to the furnace. Her goal was not just murder, but the ultimate exposure. The Riddler had lured unsuspecting people here tonight to perish, and she had lured the Batman here to unmask him before the world. Each of her hostages were trapped in different rooms, with their deaths imminent.
The greatest riddle in Gotham,
she said, stopping before a wall-sized map of the city,
is how a boy, orphaned by chaos, became a creature of order. The answer is trauma. And I am here to solve you.
A desperate battle of wits and wills ensued to save the hostages' lives. The Batman, still chained to the table, had to solve her deadly puzzles to prevent the hotel's mechanisms from killing the guests trapped in other rooms. She had studied him, anticipating his every move, using his own deductive processes against him. It was a psychological duel, each riddle designed to fracture his identity. The Batman found his mind slowly unraveling. The betrayal of the woman he loved, and who he thought loved him, impacted him more than he wanted to admit. It did not help his mind that he was still disoriented from being knocked unconscious. The riddles persisted, but with each new question, the Batman worked a hidden blade out of his glove and began attempting to free himself. The Riddler asked another riddle.
What is broken the moment you speak its name?
She asked, as a wall of spikes began to close in on a hostage.
Silence!
He growled, breaking free of his restraints. The chain links went flying as he utilized his escapology training. He pushed the Riddler out of his way, knocking her to the ground. The Batman hit the switch controlling the wall of spikes just in time, saving the hostage. The Riddler got to her feet and ran towards the hotel's stairwell. The Batman gave chase. The final confrontation occurred on the hotel's roof, overlooking the glittering, oblivious fair. Julie, cornered but triumphant, held up a remote trigger.
One last riddle, Bruce. I am the beginning of the end of time and space. I am essential to rebirth, and I surround every place. What am I?
As the Batman advanced, he saw the answer not as a word, but as a pattern. The gas lines from the hotel ran toward the fair. She planned to ignite the entire fairgrounds. In that split second, he chose not to solve the riddle, but to break the game. He tackled her, not as the Batman, but as Bruce Wayne, the man she had pretended to love. The trigger clattered to the roof as they struggled. As police swarmed the building, Julie Madison looked at Bruce not with anger, but with a twisted pride.
You finally understood,
she whispered.
The riddle was never just the game. It was everything.
As she was pulled away, she winked at the Bat and leaned in close to him.
Your secret is safe with me,
she whispered to him. Her final laugh echoed in the night, a sound as chilling as any of the Joker's grimaces. As Gotham's newest and most terrifying monster was led away, her intellect finally and fatally laid bare. The Batman stared after her. He was broken, shattered, and betrayed. The woman he had loved had turned out to be the monster he had sought from the start of this conflict. It would hurt at first, but Bruce would eventually decide to steel himself against it. This betrayal solidified a grim resolve within him, that Gotham would never stop needing the Bat. And, on a deeper level, he knew that he would never stop needing the Bat either.